It is 5:10 p.m., and I am calling this session of the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee to order. Again, I apologize for the delay. Due to technical difficulties, we were a little delayed getting started to do that. Can I get a roll call, please? Ms. Schroep?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Present.
Tom Hankins,
Here.
and Greg Schneider.
Present.
All members are present.
Okay. Can I get approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous vote. And next is can I get approval of the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Any discussion?
May I abstain, please? Thanks.
Okay. Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. Motion carries. That brings us to item 2A, a presentation on secondary trauma in educators. And again, it's Dr. Stephanie Hormig-Dismuke, hopefully I got the name right, who is going to do a presentation on her research and dissertation and looking at the school district of Beloit. So we're looking forward to this presentation. So, Dr. Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate all of you and the patience. Oh, thank you. And the patience with technology, which is always fun. Yes, so my name is Stephanie Hormig, Dr. Stephanie Hormig-Dismuke. I was born and raised here in Beloit. A little background on me so you know. I was born and raised here in Beloit from a divorced family, so half my life in Rockford, half of my life in Beloit. I graduated from Beloit Memorial High School in 2004. I went and I got my bachelor's in education with theater and English, and I taught here actually in this district for quite some time, to me at least, and I ended my teaching career here. The picture I have up here, some of you may know the gentleman next to me. That is my grandfather. He was the principal at Aldridge Middle School for 30 years, William Henning, and he kind of follows me with my passion to keep going with this district and making sure that we're doing all we can for our students and our educators and our administration. So the reason I'm here is I was doing my dissertation for my doctorate, and I focused my time on secondary vicarious trauma, and it was a focal point for me to come back to the school district of Beloit again because that is where I grew up, but it's also where I taught and the students that I saw as well as the teachers that I work with, and I know a lot of them are still here, but there are also a lot that have retired. And so when it came to trying to understand secondary trauma a little bit deeper, I decided it was time to go into the schools and actually talk to the teachers. Because when you look up and you try to find the research on educators and secondary vicarious trauma, there is very little. There is a lot with administrators, there's a lot for counselors, school psychiatrists, but there isn't very much when it comes to that trauma on educators. So I took my time with that. Currently, I am the director of the LGBTQ program with Family Services of Southern Wisconsin and Northern Illinois. I run that program as well as the Pride Theater Productions and the Rock County LGBTQ Committee out of that. So when I started my research, these were the three questions that I focused on. What support structures do retired educators feel they needed? And what supports do retired educators perceive could have helped them? So what's their thoughts on what could have helped them? And then also to talk about the third question, what their experience had that contributed to the feelings of burnout, ineffectiveness, or leaving the profession early. All of these educators that I interviewed were from the school district of Beloit. I did not go outside of this district. They were all from this district, and they range in age as well as times of service, as well as times that they were in the district and when they retired. To give a little bit of background in case you are unfamiliar about secondary and vicarious trauma, when we talk about secondary and vicarious trauma from a mental health standpoint, we're talking about the trauma that was not actually there during the actual traumatic moment. So they did not experience the hit or experience the verbal assaults or any of that. It was the story or the emotion that was passed on from a person that did experience that, most often children. So working at Family Services, specifically with Defy Domestic Abuse for the last 10 years, my focus has been a lot on domestic violence and sexual assault, and often the secondary victims are the children. They watch, they weren't necessarily there, but they see the bruises, they see the impact that it had on them. So that is what we talk about when we talk about secondary and vicarious trauma. We're talking about the trauma that wasn't actually witnessed, but the stories, the emotions that happen after. In the United States, I want to point this out, that 2/3 of all of the children that are in the schools have experienced one traumatic event by the age of 18. So this isn't something that is not happening, and I know the School District of Beloit is aware of that. I know you all have, also the educators have taken lots of training or some training on trauma-informed care, which is something I'm going to be talking about explicitly with this information. These are the demographics, smaller, but most of the demographics, you can't see all of it because of where it cut off, but most of the demographics of the teachers, they will not be named, they never will be, but these are kind of the age ranges. So you have the retirement year of the teacher is the year, so the 2004, 2007, that year. The 47 years, the 10 to 18, that is the age range that they taught students. So this is, 4 to 7 years old, 10 to 18 years old. And then the gender demographic, if they chose to give that to me. There were a total of 14, and then it has moved since past that. I have continued with this and have actually racked up about 25, again, all from the School District of Beloit, with all of this data. Some of the data that I'm giving you is based on the first 14, and I will let you know when it is after that point. So the first thing that I noticed with my research was that there were a big category of peer-induced trauma. And this came from teachers relying on other teachers or other people within the school to actually deal with that secondary trauma, that vicarious trauma. So in the first graph there for the trauma frequency from peers, those are the first 14, and between at least 1 all the way up to 6 times, they felt that their trauma was influenced by their peers to the point where it left the school building. So that means it left them when they were no longer teaching for that day. 10 out of the 14 participants in the original 14 said that they relied on their peers for the emotional support and the guidance. They didn't feel they had that necessarily in any other aspect. And then one of the quotes from one of the teachers is up on the right hand, so you can have a second to look at that. Some of those quotes are pretty profound that we're going to go through, but that is the one in particular about when it comes to peer-induced trauma. And then the last graph is from the entire 25 teachers that I've actually interviewed, where peer trauma affected them outside of the school. Currently, this is where we sit. So I just simply asked them that question. To get this information, I didn't necessarily get the answers right away. This was a interview process, so these interview questions I gave them, they got to actually have a conversation with me. I will tell you that some of the teachers, when I asked them about trauma, were like, no, I don't think so. And then I started talking, and boom, right away they had a story. Boom, right away they had a story. Another story came off. And in their brain, they either had not linked it to trauma or had felt they'd gotten over the trauma. And even when I pointed out that it was trauma, they went, yeah, that's probably right. So they did not necessarily feel it as trauma in some of these situations, but eventually when we had that conversation, talked about it, they knew and they could register it as trauma for themselves. So peer-induced trauma was something that they talked about because I had remembered when I started teaching that there was a program here in the district where every new teacher got to be paired up with another teacher that had been in the district for a while. And I remember having a very great experience with Greg Wallendahl, who was my peer mentor, but I knew that there were teachers that didn't, and I also knew that after that year was up, there was no follow-through with that. There was no, hey, how'd it go? Can we sit down as admin and talk about this? Hey, how can we make this better? It was just, hey, you have this for a year, okay, great, move on. So I wanted to get an understanding of a little bit more the process of that. So I did a lot of research and talked to them also about that program. It is voluntary for teachers, unless I'm wrong. I went and looked it up to make sure I was right a couple months ago, so if I'm wrong, please let me know. Things change. But we talked about in great deal with the other teachers I've interviewed since about it, and they enjoyed the program for the most part, but agreed that it didn't give them the basis that they needed. And when it came down to the trauma, it was easier to go to the people that they worked in their pod with, or they worked in their subject matter with, or in their grade level with, because they worked with them more closely and had a closer relationship with them. The other major find was that the administration was the key trauma to the teachers. In the school district of Beloit, after interviewing all of the 25, 85% of all the participants that I interviewed say that they felt that there was a lack of administration support on more than one occasion. So they felt that it wasn't that they didn't like going to their next door neighbor and talking about it, but that administration was not a safe place, or their administrator was not a safe person to talk about that trauma with. Actually, we had quite a few teachers give examples of this. So we had a teacher explicitly talk about a quite sad issue with a student bringing in a weapon to school, and that there was no trauma for that teacher after that happened. That teacher did not know that that gun was actually in her classroom. That teacher also did not know what was going on until they read it in the newspaper. So there was no idea for her how to handle it. A principal did not come up to her and ask her how that went. How did you feel? Hey, we had to come in and do this. How did that make you feel? There was no backtrack to check on that teacher. It was, we handled it, it happened, we moved on. There also felt to some of the teachers, again, these quotes are up there, that there wasn't a plan on how to handle secondary vicarious trauma. That there was a plan on what teachers do to help the students. There's plans in place for that, like tornado drills. You know, sadly, we have to do people coming into our building to do things that they shouldn't is also something that we practice. But there is nothing in place for mental health trauma for the students or for educators. I will say that the thing that got me the hardest with looking at the administration numbers is that there wasn't a single teacher that could not tell me when I asked them, did you 100% feel supported by your administration team the entire time you were at the district? Not a single person could do that. Outside school decisions were highly impacted by this secondary and vicarious trauma. 50% of the people that I interviewed said that they couldn't separate school mindset from the outside school mindset. So once they left the building, they could not separate. That's 50% of all of them. So 50% of that 25. 30% stated that divorce from their partner was school-related. That does not mean that that was the cause of their divorce. I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but it made an impact on that divorce. I had many teachers actually explain that it was one of the catalysts to filing. It was also one of the catalysts for them to actually realize that until they could get their work and home balance life made, that they had to make that separation. And 85% felt that administration bias led to their insecure feelings in and out of the school. So the bias and how the administration handled that. I actually had, of the 14 originals, 7 of them said that there was a bias toward their age and how long they had been in the district that had led to them feeling that they could not go to admin and actually have a conversation about any type of trauma that experience that they had either personally or in the classroom. 100% of every educator interviewed could think of a peer or student trauma that had a significant impact on them outside of school. So that means every single teacher that I have spoken to has said that some type of trauma, that vicarious secondary trauma, affected them when they left school, that they couldn't get it out of their mind. It was unable for them to just click it off, put that key away when they left the building and shut it off. And then in no way was it 100% given that you were going to be helped and supported or some kind of solution could be found at school. That one really hit me hard. That quote came from only one person, but the quote and the meaning around it was heard numerous times throughout the 25 people that I've interviewed so far. These are just some other demographics. Would the educators I interviewed do things differently? Would they actually consider not have retiring when they did or leaving the profession when they did if things had been different trauma-wise? We had one person say maybe, 2 say no, and the rest of my 14 said yes, absolutely they would. And then another sad thing that again, looking at administration, that administration support frequency, I asked them in regards to their weekly as well as their term-wise, the administrative support that they felt. Majority of them, 12 out of the original 14, said that on a weekly basis, they did not feel that they had administrative support to deal with the trauma that they were facing within their classroom as well as when they left. So with my information, and I will gladly share it with anybody that wants my full dissertation, because this is just a brief little clip of it. There is a ton more on my findings as well as my recommendations. I will gladly share that with anybody. However, I went to the district and I looked at what you have in place when it comes to teachers in particular. I remember my teacher handbook. I went and dug it out, and it's the same, except for maybe couple sentences here and there, and I left the district in my last year of teaching was 2011. And I know it's really hard to see, but the first little picture I had taken a part of was that mentoring and support for the new professional educator. It goes through pretty in depth what's going to happen. It talks about what the teacher is expected, that you can volunteer, how long you have to be in the district to volunteer. It talks about how you're supposed to serve, that there's 10 days if you do not agree with the teacher you were given, that you can actually change that teacher, or talk about having a different teacher be your peer. That is it. There are nothing in the school district of Beloit's rules on what is supposed to happen after, what the follow-up is, how that teacher is supposed to direct or guide or be with the other teacher. None of that is there. So you have a guideline, but it's, oh no, did it go away? I don't know what happened. But there's a guideline for it, but it's not specific. Then you have violence in the workplace, which is where I tried to find some type of data on trauma when there really isn't that much in the school district and in the policies and procedures in the handbook. And this is only taken from the educator side. I did not go in depth in the other handbooks that I know that are out there. I specifically focused on the educator. And then the protection of staff. There is nothing about mental health. There is nothing about how they are to deal with trauma, secondary or primary, in other words, within your handbook. It is all in regards to helping the student. There is nothing in the school district handbook on what the teacher or what the educator or administrators even are supposed to do for themselves or ask for when something happens to them or something that is impactful to them. That doesn't exist in the handbook for the teacher in particular. And I sadly would venture to believe, since I was a teacher before, I knew they weren't there when I was there, they probably aren't now in the other handbooks that are there as well. So, in my opinion, after doing all this and finding my results and things, these are the things that I think I would recommend that the school district of Beloit needs to think about. We need to look at our policy support. You know, what do we have in our policies that support the teacher? Most of the things are in regards to helping the student and protecting the student in case a teacher does something that they should not be doing. Fair? We need those. But there's nothing in our policies that help the teacher when something is affecting them from an admin or a student or even a parent's perspective. Our peer support policy that you do have, yes, it's a year, but what happens in that year? Is there every quarter you look, every quarter you do a check-in, something of that nature? It's not there. And how healthy is this? Yes, you have a 10-day window that if you do not like your teacher, you get to switch. Well, what if I like my teacher, but then halfway through the semester, something happens and we have a conflict and I try to resolve it and nothing happens and it just becomes left there? There's nothing in that policy to help that. So you don't have a healthy policy that ensures that those teachers have the ability to voice their opinions after those 10 days. And then who checks in? There's nothing in that. It's assumption, I know it was when I was a teacher, that the admin would. That my admin would check in with me, see how things are going. And I assumed with my peer support teacher, they had that as well, but I don't know. I never got that. I worked at McNeil for 2 years, and I worked at Aldrich for 3 years, and at no point in time did I have an admin ever come to me and ask me about my trauma. I never had an admin come to me and ask me and check in simply with those questions of, hey, I know you're new, or hey, I know you moved from one school to the other. How are things going? How are things going? I never had that. And then boundaries. It's really important to have boundaries, but it's also really important for educators to have boundaries with other educators because they're relying so much on each other that they're skewing the boundaries between professional life and personal life to the point where they are also experiencing that secondary and vicarious trauma, not just from the students, but also from other teachers having to feel that they have to come to them to express that because they can't go anywhere else. And then that empathy. I think every person that gets into the education world has empathy. We are all people. We want to help people. We want to be there for them. And sometimes I think we get taken advantage of with that because we are in this to help each other and to help people, but at what cost? To our mental health, to our needs as a person. And then the last thing, trauma-informed care. I think probably every person in here that has a degree in education has gone through at least one class of what trauma-informed care is and the importance of it. But do we really understand that it's not just for the students? No. You can do it for the students, but in order for a facility to be a trauma-informed care institute, it has to be for every single person. That means it's for the administration, that means it's for the educator, that means it's for the paraprofessionals, that means it's for the coaches, it's for everyone. And trauma-informed care is about meeting people where they are, knowing what their needs are, being able to go up to them and meet them there. That's one of the major foundations of that. That is not happening for educators. It's not happening for the workers because they're so busy doing it for the students, but nobody's looking at them and going, hey, you need that trauma-informed care too. You need to be met where you're at so that you can do the best for those students. It needs to be something that is not just for the teacher, in my opinion. I know most teachers go through that trauma-informed care training. Why aren't coaches going through that? Why aren't paraprofessionals getting that? Why aren't an admin getting experience not just in the basics, but then going in depth on trauma-informed care, going to the seminars and going to that, which I offer as well as Family Services offer at any point, any time that is needed. I did leave the core principles of the 6 principles of trauma-informed care because I think that is very important for us to think about, because every single thing that the teacher has told me within these interviews was focused on trauma, and that secondary vicarious trauma falls into this trauma-informed care and the need for it. If we're expecting the students to get that from the educator, we need to also give that to the educator. And that means we need to look at our policies, and I know for a fact the School District Beloit does not have any policy in relation to any of this. So that is a quick rundown of all that. The last thing I want to put out is I am Beloit proud. I did leave and I did start a career as a counselor, but I have been Beloit proud my whole life. But if we are Beloit proud, then we need to care enough about our teachers to ensure that their well-being is important so that they can also be Beloit proud. Because the sad fact of the matter is the teachers that I talked to that have left, I was in a huge class of, we started in the district and after 5 years, we had to feel like we got out. And I know that that cycle is continuing here at the school district. This might be where the change happens. If we want teachers to stay here and educate our students, then we have to give them a reason to know that they are cared about and that they are going to be met where they are. And if we can do that, then the Beloit proud thing is not just simply what we want the students to say, but also what the teachers say. And I think that's important. So any questions? Does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to give me? I will do my best to answer them.
Okay. Any questions from the committee members? Okay, Mr. Hankins.
Comments and questions. Beautiful presentation. I think
Thank you.
I'm so happy that our board policy chair is here and I'm a vice chair, so I would imagine this is going to go forward. I think it's imperative that we need to hear this as board people, because teacher retention is right at the top of our list, and the reasons why they're leaving, sometimes this gets missed, I think, or glossed over, and not to grandstand, but I asked Dr. Garrison way back in the fall, especially when ad hoc committee was talking about cutting counselors and psychologists and stuff, and we were talking about students. And I asked him, I said, well, what about teachers? I said, do they have a counselor that they can go to? And his response was somewhat, oh, yes, we do. We have that for them. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but my my wife works for Head Start, and she has for 35 years. And she has a service that is a private service that they can go to free of charge, and she's used it when things get harried, as teachers get. And I get it. I guess, I'm wondering if Dr. Garrison's not here, obviously, and Teresa, you might be able to answer. If an assertive teacher wants help, is there an avenue for them to reach out? I mean, I'm not talking about an admin checking in with them, but a teacher who is assertive and says, hey, I'm waving a flag here.
Yes. That's great. Can I have a follow-up to that? I guess. You guys don't have to answer if you don't know, but do the people that would give those resources know the signs of the flags? Because that's going to be the kicker. If the teacher doesn't recognize that they're in trauma, if the teacher doesn't recognize they're spiraling, which often that is the case, especially if I ask a teacher if they had trauma, they're like, oh, no, I don't think so. And then 5 minutes later, they're giving me 7 examples. Do we have people trained enough in the district to recognize that too? Yes. Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you.
And to your point, absolutely, the building principals need to be very aware of how to handle this, just like FMLA and other things that they have to be on top of. But this is key to teacher retention. And I really, really appreciate you bringing this to light.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Megan?
Right, thank you so much. So thank you so much for coming, and I felt really thank you for reaching out to me too to talk about this, and I was really excited that you wanted to come tonight. I think it's a space where there's so many different expectations and narratives about being a teacher. I'm still kind of processing and reacting. I know we've talked already, but I'm just hearing fresh again, and as a teacher, yeah, what you're saying really resonates. And what I've noticed myself doing while you were presenting this time, because the first, I was kind of just writing all the things down, but I started kind of reflecting, and I'm I've had some really great, whether, administrators. In fact, I work with one now that used to work in Beloit that I work with now. It's just one of my all-time favorites. But, I've worked with wonderful people, but I've also completely have had these experiences too, just like every teacher has, right? And what occurred to me is that things can happen incidentally, but it's better, right, when they happen, with intentionality. And I think that, one of our goals that's been in our strategic plan, it's in our kind of our goals this year, it's probably always going to be a goal, is teacher retention. And as we, hopefully continue to have resources that we can build on, I would love to see, I think, maybe more direction in collaboration, right, between the board, the teachers, elevating out their voices and experiences like you've done so beautifully in your presentation, and bringing in administration who also might have a whole different perspective, here we have these things. How do we make this an intentional practice, right? Because there's always ways to progress and get better. And I love how you said that too about we're Beloit proud, and the way that we sustain that is by continuously improving on the things that we have. So I just I guess just as a teacher, really appreciate your work. I think that we have some really strong assets in the school district of Beloit that we can build from, and I think just bringing that, intentionality and focus more at the forefront, because we're often lost in okay, we got a referendum, and we got this, and you're always in survival mode, right? The other thing I guess that occurred to me this time listening was just, as a teacher, you get into the profession with this mindset of I'm here to sacrifice. I'm gonna burn out. I'm gonna work too hard and take, get to work at 6 and leave at 6 and then be grading stuff after I put my kids to bed, right? Like I'm sure we've all lived that, right? But it doesn't like necessarily have to be that way. And I think too, like, with my own colleagues, sometimes we'll say like, you're still a really good teacher. Like you're still showing up for your kids. You don't have to kill yourself to do it. And I guess I did have one other, thought and question. I just got to remember where I was because I got kind of lost in my thoughts there. Right, there it is. Okay, so I guess it's a little trite to say, but you've heard, I'm sure, the saying before, right? Like a teacher's work environment is a student's learning environment. And I don't think I've ever talked to a teacher here in the school district of Beloit who doesn't feel strongly in a positive way about the value of trauma-informed care and practices for students. Right. I think if we can continue to bring this to the forefront and hopefully work into our strategic plan and through policy, like how can we be more intentional and proactive in making sure that our narratives and perspectives are aligned and like your experience has a value and matters, and here's what we have, and here's how this systematically can work better. I think that's like going to have a huge impact for our kids because, it really, it gets it out there, it gets it more explicit. And when you're like the teacher in the classroom, like feeling that, it's top of mind and you feel loved and cared for, it's easier for you to explicitly show your kids, like, this is what I'm doing to make sure that all of us are included and cared for and like, keep it positive, safe learning environments, all the good stuff, right? Yeah. So I know that was just like a lot of reactions. I guess the only question I had for you is, you had mentioned like lack of like policy and practice. That's something I think would be a wonderful avenue. Did you at all get a chance to explore, are there districts that have like maybe more like clearly or explicitly defined policies and practices? And if not, that's okay. I was just sort of wondering if you could share that.
No. I got to look. I did look. I looked very intently. But this is a very new thought process since COVID and since when teachers had to come back from COVID and there was a giant switch of, nope, I'm done. Nope, I can't. I'm not going to do this. There has to be a balance that we didn't have. Since that happened, districts are looking into better practices for their teachers to be able to have these resources. However, I did not get a chance to look at every policy because that's a lot. But for the districts, at least around here in the state of Wisconsin and the state of Illinois, there is not. There is not policies that I was made aware of that entitle the educator part to get that extra trauma-informed care, not just to the student, but to themselves.
No, and that's not a bad response. And the reason I wanted to ask is, I think this is a great opportunity. Here you are, and you're a Beloiter. You've done this wonderful work. You're here at our board meeting talking about it. What a great opportunity for us to be pioneers and really like leaders, like at least regionally, and bringing that to the forefront. Teacher retention is a huge issue in every district right now, and I think that just adds a lot of value to what you're sharing and the possibilities that we have. So just thank you for doing this work and for bringing this up for us.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I have tweaked some of my questions and added more as I've gone on. One of the things I have tried to talk to them about is those instances of a positive experience and what they had that they didn't have with the negative one. And so I'm currently gathering that data too, to be able to kind of look at, okay, what are the key maybe running components that are the same there that can hopefully lead to maybe more, exact, hey, if we do this, then we can, get a little farther ahead.
All right, Mr. Nichols. Nope.
Thank you. Dr.
Yeah, yes, Hormick Dismuke, yeah.
Okay.
I hyphened it, I had to hyphenate it.
Very good presentation. I do have some questions, and I guess the first one is, so in your teaching career, did you experience this at both districts that you taught at? You said New York and Beloit. So did you experience that? Is that what you led you to where you are today?
Definitely. I experienced it in New York City and in Beloit, but in different ways. I would say that when I taught in New York City, I had a very rough time. We had a school shooting, we had a student commit suicide, we had a lot of negative things happen within the school, but then we had Rachel Ray donate an entire kitchen to our family consumer ed program, so it was very roller coastery. And I did notice that a lot of the teachers were burning out, but were happy to burn out, if that makes sense, which is a very odd thing to say, but they were, yeah, I'm burned out, but I'm glad I'm burned out that I can take the extra step, and they weren't wanting to go back. I didn't have that same response here when I taught here. I did feel a lot of the time that burnout was very negative, and that it wasn't looked at as something that will happen or does happen, that it's a natural thing for us all to have in our lives, this not big dramatic burnout, but a little bit of that, questioning of yourself, are you doing the right things, making those decisions, and inevitably in our careers, whatever they are, whether it's education or not, we're gonna have those. But it was a little different here in regards to, I'm burned out, I'm done, and walk away. And I feel like I wish I could talk to those New York teachers, because it was my student teaching, and then I was subbing for a year, so I didn't make the connections necessarily to go back and ask those teachers. But there was definitely a dynamic, and it could be the culture. Although when I was a teacher, looked at Beloit in a New York City manner, because the student dynamic is not exactly what New York City has, but it's close. And it has some of the things and some of the components that inner city New York City has as well. So, did I answer that question? I'm sure I got off track there for a little bit.
Yeah,
So
no, you did.
Okay.
You did a good job. So, never mind. That question, we could be here for an hour, so. Anyway, thank you.
Email me. We can go, you can email for an hour, that's fine.
I got your email. Thank you.
I do greatly appreciate your presentation. I think we could continue talking about this whole concern that we have, and how we better support our teachers for a very long time. And hopefully we'll continue to do this, to go with it. I know that we do provide a lot more services for teachers than what are in the teacher handbook. And so maybe it's just to keep in mind that as we, again, go through that, to begin to update that handbook, that we begin to include more things in there to make it, so we're providing better information to the teachers of the supports that they really do have. And again, just to make it more intentional, that we do reach out periodically, the staff, to say, okay, we do have other supports. If you don't feel you're getting it here, here's some other options for you, some other things that are there. Again, it's great to always to look at things and realize that, okay, we can get better at what we're doing, just like everybody else, and we need to continue that. But to be a little bit more intentional in informing people of options and resources that are out there. So again, thank you very much. I do appreciate your time and your conversation. Okay.
Thank you very much.
That will take us to item 2B, the summer school presentation.
Thanks, Brett. Oh goodness, I pushed the wrong thing here. Okay, good evening. I am here to show kind of our first draft of summer school. Typical cadence is we go to the committee twice and then ask on the second night for it to be approved and moved to the board. So I will be back again when things are shored up a little bit more. Something that's a little bit different this year is, and I'll get to the slide, is just our 2-year grant that we had written, that competitive grant, which got us around I think it was $780,000 to support summer school, has been sunset. So we're back to how we were pre-grant and having to think about how to fund summer school. So that's the bigger change, and that's why we're a little more in draft version, because we're thinking about our programming and our offerings. In our summer school, this just shows kind of the 3 big buckets that we work towards, and that's support and enrichment, credit recovery, and what we've called opportunity bridges. We do have some additional requirements under the Reading Act 20 legislation offering for summer school, which is actually fitting pretty nicely into the structure we had already created, which is our opportunity bridges. We're just going to be building that out some more. So again, the vision for our summer school programming is the School District of Beloit aims to provide high-quality learning and enrichment opportunities that supports the whole child through academics, which we call the A path, and wellness and enrichment, which we call the WE path. So when students are participating in our summer school programming, they have some classes that are the A path, literacy and math, and they have some wellness and enrichment WE path opportunities. And then these are our goals. Something that should be noteworthy is originally when we had to apply for the competitive grant for summer school, we had to demonstrate that we had high quality programming. And so because at that time, the structure that we had played, it was easier to write that grant because the offerings that we already had in place, DPI recognized as a high quality summer school program. Goal 2, provide opportunities for face-to-face hands-on learning. That's important because coming out of COVID, where our students had spent a lot of time with on-screen time, we had really aimed towards building a summer school program that gave students opportunities for hands-on learning, project-based out in the community, and even our Lit Camp, which is in the elementary schools, really got books in the hands of students. And it doesn't mean that we won't use some online resources by any means. However, that was really a focus, and I think continues to be, because in the summertime, we want kids active and hands-on. So this just gets to the budget and the materials. So again, the ESSER Summer School Competitive Grant has been sunsetted. So for that reason, we're going back to relying on our district funding. I had asked the finance department to put together a budget. So it'll run approximately just under $400,000, and that's based on enrollment. So the way that the district is budgeted for summer school is you take the number of students and they're kind of crunched into an instructional minutes, and then that turns into the enrollment reimbursement that we get back from the state. So you have to be careful when you run a summer school program because it's easy to go overboard. And when we were looking at that 4 years ago and then working through our grant to stay within the parameters, something we looked at was not so much the expenditures on materials. It was more about the staffing and making sure that we weren't overstaffing summer school. So that's really been some work that we've done cross-departmental. These are our typical resources that we use. We did a larger purchase, I think it was 3 years ago, for Lit Camp. It cost about $40,000 at that time, and it offers both Spanish and English, and it's a framework for basically working on comprehension in our K-5s, and it creates this sort of camp dynamic where the kids feel like they're at a camp, and there's some songs and things like that involved. So we just usually have to replenish those, just like the books and things like that. And then in addition, we've purchased Haggerty kits. Haggerty really gets at foundational skills in reading, and so that's what we'll start to lean into. Our ARC reading program also provides tools to get at foundational reading skills, but those are just some different things. Manipulatives and supplies to replenish our STEAM kits that we already have ready to go. We purchased interest chapter books in the upper grades. So those are just kind of some of the things that we purchased during that time. But again, the overall cost for summer school is really in its staffing and that ratio between the student enrollment and the staffing. This year, we're going to have 3 sites. We'll have the 4K Elementary at Todd and Converse, and that allows kind of both sides of town. And of course, we'll have those bus stops like we normally do. Todd Elementary has a before and after school CLC grant that they run a summer program. They run during the summer. And then we also partner with Boys and Girls Club. And I need to speak to Community Action a little bit more that it's upcoming because they have an early childhood center that is opening. And so I'll work with them to see if that's an opportunity for a bus stop. So then families have a choice because they no longer have Merrill Community Center. We used to do Merrill Community Center and Boys and Girls Club. So we'll have Boys and Girls Club, and then I need to connect with Mark Perry just to figure out where that is at and if that's an opportunity, their new site. And again, we have A-Path and We-Path, and then we have these equitable opportunity bridges. And so this was built into our summer program. And again, this year, really leaning into that first bullet. Act 20 legislation says that students that are found within the below the 25th percentile on the universal screener and have reading plans, that the district has to offer, not mandate, but offer summer school programming that focuses on early reading foundations and targets their reading plans. So you'll see in a schedule already, we had that set up where we were doing pullout for interventionists. We've hired reading interventionists in the district and math to work with kids, but this will be a little more blown up in the sense of in the schedule and making sure that we're meeting the parameters of Act 20. Elementary times are here and dates are here. And just those days are off, obviously, for the holiday there. And then we do a kind of mid-time break. We want to make sure that staff, these are teachers that are just coming off of a teaching year, and they have about a week off and they start summer school. So we want to give them a little bit of time in the summer, ending by August 1st, to give them some time off so that they're refreshed and ready to come back for the school year. It's a lot to teach summer school. A lot of times teachers just need some downtime in the summer. I, being a teacher for 14 years, can very much relate to that. So we're also mindful of the time that staff need. This is a sample schedule. I realize it's small for you, but I just wanted to, I wanted to provide this for you because when we start to map this out, and I work very closely with Rochelle Elliott, this is a lot of her work as she helps to support summer school and the coordination of it. We start to create these types of master schedules. And at the very bottom there, you can start to see how we're planning the groups for Act 20. And so students that will be in the Act 20 will do a rotation during their A path or academic path, while other students are at Lit Camp, and then we're rotating them through. So all students attending the elementary can do the A path in specifically in literacy and in math, either Lit Camp or their Act 20's explicit instruction that's geared towards their reading plans. And then middle school times. So the middle school and the high school were both in the Cunningham building last year, and that's because of, if you recall, the HVAC system and all the other things that were happening at BMHS in the summer, so we had to relocate. So this year, the middle school and the high school will be back at BMHS, which is nice for the fact that like the swimming pool is over there and the track and the gym and different things like that. Cunningham, obviously, building has a gym, but there were just some resources and some transportation that we had to do. So this will be nice to be back, and we now have a fully air-conditioned third floor, which makes things much more enjoyable for those of us that are teaching in the summertime at the high school. Down below, we have those current offerings. So this is some more of the work that Rochelle and I will be working on. In the middle school, we have a lot of partnerships and offerings. And so Rochelle and I are going to be reaching out to some of those partners and determining what are some of the sessions that we can give to the students. And again, thinking about our finances and making sure that we're sustaining a summer school program that is supported by the enrollment. And living within those parameters. So more to come on this a little bit. We need a little more time to shore up some of those offerings, and then when we come back a month later, we'll have that for you. Again, this is kind of like what a sample schedule looks like for our middle school students. They can always sign up for literacy and math, and then we want to do a lot of other fun things. I thought last year we had some good offerings and just some different people in the community that came out to support us. So right now, our target will be April 25th when registration opens. Right now, if you go on our School District of Beloit website and you go to summer school, it'll say like summer school enrollment coming soon, April 25th registration. We have a booklet that we always upload there. We'll have this, all of the Skyward directions for parents to register online, all of that kind of stuff. I think I pretty much addressed everything else there in those bullets. Morning session with breakfast. We always offer breakfast and lunch to our kids. High school dates and times, similar. Again, registration's April 25th. And these are our opportunity bridges for them is Algebra 1 and 2 and English 9. That was a curriculum that was written a couple years ago by our infamous Ken Davis helped a lot with that, and then our former director, Kelly Gorod, because we understand the importance of passing algebra, and that's definitely a gatekeeper, one could call that content area for kids in progressing in high school. And then the other one is we always offer summer school graduation. It's actually one of my favorite graduations to go to. And we'll have kids there, maybe between 2, 3, 4, 5 graduates. And those are students that are still counted in the school year for graduating. They just had some stuff that they needed to finish, and so we give them that opportunity if they had some credit recovery that they needed to do or so forth. And what I really like about that graduation is, first of all, it's small and intimate. You get to talk to families and kids, but it's oftentimes kids that have really been striving and they just really want to graduate and they make it. And so I'll send out the invite when that summer school graduation is, so that you're all welcome to attend. We have had board members in the past attend. And then again, just reminder for budget, materials and resources. It'll only just be what we need to replenish for materials, and then we're just leaning into those reading intervention materials to make sure that we're building out what's required for Act 20. And that's all.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate
Welcome.
the presentation. If anybody has any questions, if you'll please let me know. I will make sure that I forward them on so we get responses to that. Vice President Nichols, can we run over a few minutes to hear about Make 48? Great. Okay, that takes us to item 2C, a new course proposal. Make 48 Innovation Experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it?
We got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Am I on? Here we go. Good evening. Jeff Stenders, Director of CTE and Alternative Education for the district. Tonight, I'm going to present a quick piece on an opportunity that just came about a few weeks back. Make 48 Innovation Experience. If you've been familiar with the Make 48 competition that's been held here in Beloit for a couple of years. In year 2, we had a student group from Beloit Memorial who won the competition and then moved on to the nationals. Our current project lead, the way engineering teacher, Paul Donovan, is also the patent attorney that has worked for that group and organization. And through that, we were able to have a pilot program this year of curriculum in a class. And so we are piloting it during academic lab at lunchtime. From that grew out this Make 48 proposal where they're now doing it as a full-blown course. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and present with you tonight is about the course. So this is now going to be a full-fledged semester-long course on our AB schedule.
It's to expand our opportunities in our engineering pathway. So it would be another option if we have 3 courses in a pathway. We're looking to put this as one of the options for it. It expands on our previous experiences that we've had in the school district of Beloit. With that, they have reserved a spot for us because we have had that connection. And it blends STEM, business, creative problem solving with this. It also has a component that's aligned to Skills USA that we can choose to be in a competition that's specific to Skills USA piece with it, which is our student organization. So this aligns with the next generation science standards, Common Core standards for math and language arts. And so this is very well vetted through the Make 48 organization. There are only going to be 128 schools in the United States that get to participate in this in the competition format. There are options to participate that are not in the competition format, but there are going to be only 128 in the whole United States. We have a spot that is reserved for us, but again, based upon our past experience. The winners from this competition, or what's going to happen is there are teams of 3 within a class, and they look at about 15 to 18 students that are a part of this. They get into what's called a pod, where all of those teams will be grouped in with some other students from pods. The winner from that goes on to the next round, which is the regional competition, similar to what was held on the weekend in Beloit before, and that's now the televised conference. So there will no longer be going to communities and saying, we're just gonna open it up to teams and run the Make 48 competition. The only way to participate now in that competition is through the school programming, is what they're going to have. They will go ahead and submit a video in November and pitch their idea and then continue to work on making changes to it. The winners are announced in, I believe, late December, and then they have some time in January to get ready, and then they'll compete in the springtime. And then if the winners from those ones go on, it's the national competition sometime in late summer, early fall the following year. So there's kind of a picture of what the bracket looks like that they have proposed. Again, 128 schools will participate, and then they move along from there. The playoffs in the white are the now filmed televised Make 48 competitions. So in the materials I provided, there's a flyer from Make 48. There's a course guide and summary that goes along with that. So what we're looking to do is put this into as a new class, and I understand we're sort of out of the rotation. It wasn't in our course guidebook, but the opportunity just came along a few weeks ago, and so I'd be bringing this back again next month to ask them to go to the full board for consent. So, questions?
Any quick questions? Okay. Otherwise, just again, if you have any questions, let me know and we'll get answers to those. Great. Thank you for the presentation on this program. It's another great opportunity for students in the school district of Beloit.
Thank you.
So for the sake of time, we'll go to item 3A. Our next meeting will be April 15th at 5 o'clock, which brings us to adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you. So for the regular board meeting, can we shoot for, hello, can we shoot for 6:10, everybody? That's 4 minutes. Everybody good? Okay, 6:10. Thanks. Got there quicker than I thought we were going to get to at one point. we all get seated so we can get started, please? Thank you. Mrs. Shope, are you ready? Okay. Good evening. This is the call to order for the regular Tuesday, March 18th regular board meeting. We're a little bit late. It's 6:12. Mrs. Shope, could we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller,
Present?
Tom Hankins,
Here.
Brian Anderson cannot be with us this evening. President Johnson is not available this evening. She's doing a referendum session. Greg Schneider
Present.
and Amy Levy will be joining us in a little while, and Brian Nichols.
Here.
Okay, all members are present except Brian Anderson and President Johnson. And as I said, Amy Levy will be joining us.
Thank you. Could I get approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried. For the Pledge of Allegiance, we have, and what happened to my sheet? I lost my sheet.
That's okay. I got you.
So please introduce yourself and the girls that are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Elliott. I am the Director of Early Literacy and Professional Development. I'm also the Merrill SIP Liaison. And I have Alani and a Corey from Merrill Elementary going to do the pledge today for us.
Good deal.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And they said we could do a small clap for them, just a small one.
So as Mrs. Shope said, Board President Johnson is not here, but will be here later. So in her absence, I have a document that I'm going to read to you, so please bear with me. President's Report for March 18th, 2025. Good evening. Thank you for being here and for your continued interest and support for the School District of Beloit. Tonight, I have shared a brief submitted to me by Professor Adams. I have known of Professor Adams and his contributions to the greater Beloit area ever since I was a student at Beloit College a few decades ago. One summer, I even worked for one of his initiatives, Bellmark Associates, a market research organization managed by Beloit College students. Professor Adams has been instrumental in the revitalization of Beloit's economic development. Professor Adams' works have inspired and propelled local, commercial, and nonprofit organizations. His vision to grow and beautify Beloit has benefited us all in some manner. Professor Adams looks at problems analytically, beginning with a thorough study of data to identify areas of greatest need. He explains things to me patiently and methodically, always thoughtfully answering all my questions. When I receive briefs and reports from Professor Adams, I know the information is accurate. This brief School District of Beloit, a note on progress, is no different. Aside from the scatter plots, none of these are new data for any of us. We've seen these numbers. Our scores are as reported by the DPI over the last 3 years. Let's break these down a little. The DPI overall report card score is weighted for all school districts and schools based on the areas of achievement, growth, target group outcome, and on track to graduation. The percentage weight of each is based on the makeup of the student group's demographics. The reason it has been done this way is because of the disproportionate challenges marginalized students must overcome to achieve the same success as non-marginalized students. The averaged achievement score is based on the state test results. This past reporting year, the DPI changed the cut scores from these tests, making them incomparable to previous years. I have been told by DPA to not compare this year's score to previous years, as the test scoring is not the same. Please note, this year's score for English Language Arts is the same as the previous year, both being 31.7. This indicates this year's score may be lower than last year's. As stated in a DPI memo, if this year's result was lower than last year's, they would use the higher of the two. I am concerned that even with the changes in cut scores, the SDB still performed lower than the year before. Likewise, the target group outcome achievement score is also the same as the prior year, both being 5.9. The forward test scores are not to be compared to previous years. There were declines from the 21-22 school year to the 22-23 school year. The 23-24 school year is when the changes took place. What is noted is regardless of any of these scores, relative to other school districts in the state, the SDB is still one of the lowest ranking districts. While no one is expecting us to be a high ranking district overnight, what we should expect are comprehensive, unbiased evaluations of the data, action plans to address deficiencies, and accountability so our students and community know we are taking steps to have accelerated growth in our district's academic achievement. Consider this a plea to our parents, families, and community to help us make these necessary improvements. Students learn the subject material much better when they are in school and when these classrooms are well managed. Families need to be engaged with their students' learning, behavior, and education. Many of the challenges facing the Beloit School District can and should be addressed with partnerships from community organizations. It is the role of the board to have oversight of the school district. It is our duty to ask questions, study information, and provide a vision of the district's future. We don't have to like the data or how we currently are doing, but we should not accept the continued rank of being in the lowest 5% of the state. Personally, I would rather receive and be responsive to this information in a report from a concerned, well-informed constituent rather than having a higher authority such as the state DPI or Federal Department of Education step in with mandates. I believe we can make progress at accelerated rates. It is important to consider current information from more than one source. Otherwise, this may lead to incorrect or faulty assessments and perceptions. It is accurate to say that, according to the 23-24 DPI report card, the school district of Beloit didn't make growth. It is also accurate to say this growth was not great enough to move us to a higher statewide ranking. In closing, we must maintain our focus on the needs of our students. We must be able to accept both praise and criticism respectfully. We have much to be proud of. Our theater, arts, and music programs, our CETE opportunities, our advanced placement offerings are just a few examples of things our students are excelling in. Together, let's shift to an accelerated growth mindset. Together, let's work to make improvements to our district. Together, let's be Beloit proud. And that ends that document. So the next item on the agenda is Board Member Hankins for upcoming events and announcements.
Thank you, Vice President Nichols. Good evening. These are the announcements for Tuesday, March 18th. The Aldrich 7th and 8th grade orchestra concert is Tuesday, March 25th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Join our business services staff for Coffee Connections at the Blender Cafe at the Beloit Public Library on Wednesday, March 26th. We still have some referendum information sessions coming. The State Line Boys and Girls Club will host a sessions tomorrow, Wednesday at noon, as well as the Grinnell Senior Center at 12:45. And wrapping it up on Wednesday will be a session at the Merrill Community Center at 5:30. There are a couple more sessions before Election Day on April 1st. For details, please visit our website under the 2025 referendum tab. Find all of your referendum needs on the 2025 referendum page, or feel free to contact Dr. Garrison or a board member who will be happy to answer your questions. Our future board meeting dates include Ad hoc Committee meets tomorrow 5 p.m. here. Business Operations and Finance meeting at 5 p.m., followed by the regular board meeting at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, April 5th. April 1st after you have voted. Police Policy Committee meeting on Wednesday, April 2nd at 5:30. One last quick reminder. Spring break for students and teachers begins Monday, March 31st, and classes resume Tuesday, April 8th. Thank you, and this concludes the announcements for tonight.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Great job. Next item on the agenda is 3A, recognition of social workers. And I'm going to be assisted by Mrs. Beavers. And so the purpose, just let me read a couple. The purpose is to recognize and honor staff, students, community members, and partners for their outstanding achievements, goals, or service. And that brings us to our social workers recognition. We would like to recognize the incredible impact our social workers have on our students, families, and social communities. Your dedication to providing emotional support, advocacy, leadership, and essential resources helps ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed both academically and personally. I'd like to have if you're here, I would like to have you stand up when I call your name and remain standing, please. Abby Baxter, Lori Hall, Harmony Shepard, Whitney Klein Avery, Clifton Murray, Amy Langer, Stacy Nemitz, Martha McHugh, Shiloh Pruitt, Jasmine Hill, Kayla Weller, and Audrey Buchanan. Let's give a round of applause for you guys. Thank you so much. Let's take a moment to show our appreciation for the hard work and commitment of our social workers, school social workers. Your efforts create a more supportive and inclusive environment for all, and we are truly grateful for everything that you do, and I'm going to stand for that. Thank you. The next item on tonight's agenda is the recognition of Glow Art exhibits to recognize and honor staff, students, community members, and partners for their outstanding achievements, goal, or service. The Board of Education and District would like to recognize and acknowledge the Glow Art by Catherine Buchanan, art teacher at Gaston Elementary. Are you in the room? Okay, great. And her students, as well as Mandy Kinchi, art teacher at Tyler Elementary, and her students. Thank you. And Mrs. Beavers just put up the slideshow, and this is incredible. I got to tell you, I'm really impressed. This is the Gaston Elementary Glow Art Show, and if you just watch and take note of the beautiful work that these students did at Gaston. And next up is Todd, Elementary, Glow Show. Very great. Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Beavers. Thank you for your assistance on that and putting that on the screen. I have to tell you, last April, my wife's grandchildren came from California and Virginia to our house, and her one granddaughter is extremely creative, like you two ladies are, and she did a glow room in our entire basement. So that was my first experience with glow room, glow work, and it's incredible. So, and you proved that tonight. Thank you. Again, thanks. Board Member Hankins.
Yeah, just a comment. I was fortunate. I'm sorry I didn't get to Gaston, but I did get to Todd and Mrs. Kinchy's. And I was so, takes me way back. I was very impressed. Takes me way back to college days and where glow-in-the-dark paint was hot and heavy and everybody was using it. My roommate and I, we glow-in-the-dark painted our ceiling. Our RA was not too happy with us. But anyways, it took me back, and putting those blue light or black lights on them and stuff like that. But very creative, and it was fun to go. And I'm sorry, I'll make it to Gaston next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Okay, moving on to 4A, public comment. Mrs. Shope, do we have any public comments tonight?
I have one here in the room.
Okay,
I have James.
okay.
That for you?
No, I got it.
Okay.
Is there a high school student in here? Come on up here. You're a senior? Hold that. Do you know what this is?
No.
Okay. Well, this four-year journey is coming to an end. But November 13th of next year, there'll be an all-school assembly. You won't be there. That'll have to do with a young man named Johnny Watts. Had you ever heard of Johnny Watts?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, do you recognize some of these names on this sheet?
Pedro. Camden.
Amari?
Amari, yes, sir.
Yeah, these are my heroes. You know why they're my heroes? Because I was never good enough to put on a Beloit Memorial basketball jersey. But I want you to stay there. Is that all right?
Yeah.
This is hopefully on November 13th, this young man, someone will know who Johnny Watts was. I just talked to the city council last night about making November 13th, 11:45, Johnny Watts Day in the city of Beloit. I told them to contact either the school administration or board members, because you could sort of fill them in on the story. Why did I mention you? Well, I ran into someone that said, well, the school board, oh, they did this, so they can do the simple things. Are you kidding me? To take this story, this board of 100 years, and bring this story to look with all the other things you have to do. You took the time to look at this story. The family felt their story, they knew what it was. And they wanted to keep it that way. If it was going to be brought out to the public, how was it going to be done? You treated the family with dignity and respect. And they will always be appreciative of what you did. And so, Board Member Greg Snyder, thank you. Amy Levy, thank you. Her husband kept this ball rolling. Brian Nichols, thank you. Tia Johnson, thank you. Brian Anderson, thank you. Tom Hankins, thank you, and Megan Miller. If you ever want, I always had the confidence that the school board would know what to do with this, and you did not disappoint me. I didn't think you would, because you have the concept of students first. If you hadn't been able to take this story and bring it back to life. So, Johnny Watts. This is just the 1933. I mean, how many people can walk out of a school with a state championship trophy, right, for a month? But I've been on my human factor tour for the Beloit School District, and I hope I've shared pictures of people holding this trophy, like this young man. Hopefully, it brought pleasure to you as they have holding this trophy. Johnny led Beloit High School to 3 state basketball championships in 32, 33, and 34. You know what he did his junior year? The other team, he was the first black athlete to play in the state tournament. So in the quarterfinal game, they undercut him. Now, they don't know if it happened for real or not, but they broke his wrist. And you know what he did? He didn't suit up for the semifinal game, but this team, your ancestors, this is part of your genes. They got to the championship game, right? Johnny's sitting on the bench with 2 ping pong paddles together, bracing his broken wrist, his arms like this. It's 2 minutes to go. The team is behind. And the other team think we're going to win because this kid ain't coming off the bench. Johnny gets off the bench and he goes into the game. The crowd goes crazy. They see this young man with his arm dangling. Within 20 seconds of entering, 40 seconds, he steals the ball and scores a winning basket with a broken wrist. That's part of your heritage. You go to Beloit Memorial High School. You cannot but succeed. And I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid. When I talked to the ball players, I got all their autographs. They're my heroes. But I started with Barbara Hickman. She was sitting in the audience. My 3rd grade teacher, give me a break. How can you not? If I told people, if Barbara Hickman told me to sit down, I'm not even looking for a chair. And that's out of respect, nothing else. But I'm glad you were here tonight. So I want to thank you again, and I'll be returning this. Someone said, hope this doesn't show up on eBay or something. No, it's not going on eBay. I'm going to take it back to the school next week, and sometime when you're walking down by the gym, you'll see 3 of these. What do you think of a young man with a broken wrist going in and winning the game?
It's crazy. It's different.
You hear what he said? That's crazy. That's crazy. What sport do you play?
Football.
Oh, okay. Well, Johnny was a football player, but Jim Caldwell. I mean, I could go on. I could pick any subject at the high school. I just happened to happen on the Johnny Watts story. There's many, many more. Well, thanks for coming up. Thank you.
I'm just going to say a couple things. Mr. Simmons, your drive and your perseverance and your passion for this has been amazing, and you never gave up. And I think that's one thing that we all need to take away from tonight. Never give up, and you've honored someone that should have been honored a long time ago, and he's going to be honored. And it's a special part of being Beloit proud and being a Purple Knight. So, thank you again. Okay, Michelle, that was it? Yep, okay, thank you. Next, we have our student board report by Anahi Arroyo.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, as we know, there was technical difficulties last month, so I was given extra minutes to kind of go over both last month's report and this month's report. So from my perspective, from last month, school has been going good. Seniors have been submitting applications for college and scholarships as deadlines approach. For this month, once again, school has been going great. Me and my peers have been working hard to find ways to inform our peers of the importance of the referendum. Student concerns. Last month's was the Hispanic and Latino students have raised their concerns regarding everything going on with ICE. As a student who is Hispanic, I understand where their anxiety is coming from. I did reassure those students that I've talked to Mrs. Pels, Dr. Garrison, and Ms. Silva, our family advocate, who has reassured me that they have a plan in place as the safety of the students is their first priority. This month's for students' concerns have been pretty much just the referendum. As a student and with having conversation with my peers right now, the worry is the impact it's going to make if it doesn't pass, which is why we're putting in efforts to making sure not only our parents but our community knows the importance of it. For staff highlights, I have Mrs. Pels, and this person said, I wanted to take a moment to thank Mrs. Pels for all her hard work. I see the countless hours she works to ensure that our school continues to stay up and running. I want her to know her efforts don't go unnoticed. Thank you, Mrs. Pels. And then for our second one, it's Mrs. Carla. Miss Carla is one of our secretaries in the main office. She not only is a secretary, but she also takes the time to build a relationship with the students. Many students stop by just to say hello, and you can tell how much the students love her as well as the staff. Thank you for what you do, Miss Carla. Next, we have, I got the chance to talk to Mr. Hoey for men's hockey, and here are the questions I asked him. How have you felt about this season? He said, the season had some ups and downs. We didn't have a full roster until the second half of the season, so we were playing much better down the stretch, which is important because playoffs, as this was last month, are tonight, which once again was for last month. What was the most exciting thing about the season? The most exciting thing about the season is just watching the growth we've made as a team. The Big 8 All-Conference team was just announced, and we had 2 guys on first team, Marcus Allen and Logan Tice. And 2 guys received honorable mention, Jaden, I'm gonna butcher this, Pachoni, and Drake Joel. And then the last question I asked him was, what motivates you to be a coach? And he said, what motivates me to be a coach is a relationship I build with the players. I love running into players I coached 10 or 15 years ago and talking to them about their lives and what they are up to. We always have great conversations about big games or funny things that happened when they played. Thank you for all you do, Mr. Hoey. And lastly, I have program highlight. So this month, and I'm combining both, I'm highlighting JAG, which JAG stands for Jobs for American Graduates. It's a class offered at the high school. I am fortunate to be part of it. The way I see it, it is a class that gets us ready for the next chapter of our lives after high school. We get to visit colleges within 100 miles from the school and attend conferences, which I had the opportunity and privilege to go to in December, which is an all-country thing. So I got to meet students and make friends from students from Nevada, California, Arizona, any state, you name it. And it is all paid from the JAG program, so it was a free all-expense trip, which I thought was very cool. And I actually get to go to the one in April in Indiana, so I'm very excited for that. It's a great opportunity, and there's so many more programs that are offered at the high school like this that I think are very cool about in BMHS. And that's all I have for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Anahi. Great job. Okay, now we're going to get into our board committee reports. On the policy committee was held Wednesday, March the 5th here in the boardroom, and we went over and discussed Act 20 and the policies that are part of that. And those will be on the consent agenda tonight. And then we also had a presentation on the food service report from the inspection by the DPI, and those policies have been updated and are also on the consent agenda for tonight. So that's for the policy committee. Mr. Schneider, do you want to talk about the teacher learning equity?
Absolutely.
Equity
Thank you
people
so
serve.
very much. I do first want to thank Vice President Nichols for allowing us to run over. We started a little late due to technical difficulties, but we still got everything in that we needed to do. We started out with a presentation by Stephanie Hormig-Dismuke on a secondary vicarious trauma in educators. I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at trauma in students and helping to support them, and sometimes we kind of forget that that also happens to our educators, and it reminds us that we need to do a little better job with that, and also to make sure that the services that we currently offer for teachers are available for them are also out, and so teachers become more aware of them so they can continue to utilize those kinds of things. It's a great discussion. I mean, her topic was part of her Doctor of Education dissertation and completed with retired staff of the school district of Beloit. So it truly was a home base discussion and report that was there. We'll continue to discuss that as we go into the future. We had the first presentation taking a look at summer school offerings for this coming summer. Again, the plans are for 3 sites at Todd Converse Elementary Schools and at the high school. Students can participate in the academic path, the wellness and enrichment path, or the equitable opportunities bridges. And at this time, summer school is scheduled from June 24th to July 31st. We also heard a quick presentation on a new course called Make 48. It's an immersive hands-on course designed as an authentic project learning-based model. There are assignments and activities that support and inform the final product which students develop. It will expand opportunities in the engineering pathway aligned with Skills USA, and also blend STEM, business, creative problem solving for careers in innovations, design, and product development. And it's the students participating in this have the opportunity to engage in a competition, and it's a very limited number of schools throughout the country that are allowed to participate in that. This is going to be a great way for students to use the skills that they've learned in all their other courses in an applied fashion, and a great opportunity for them. Our next meeting will be a month from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Schneider. Board Member Miller. Oh. You had questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I beg your pardon, I should have asked this back when Teresa was giving the summer school. Ms. Mortek, and again, pardon my ignorance, but is BLA involved in summer school? And then can those kids go to summer school, or do they go to summer school?
Did you say BLA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so they're,
Yep, so they'll all be at, last year we were all in the Cunningham building.
Right,
So this
they
year
were-
we'll all be at the Beloit Memorial High School, and it's both middle school and all high school students at BMHS.
perfect, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So I don't have too long of a legislative update. I know Board President Johnson had wanted us to talk about Day at the Capitol, and Board Member Levy was kind enough to represent the board there. And maybe, I don't know if maybe we wait until next time when she's back, she'd like to share her experiences. So I just have a brief update. I didn't put together like a whole big report because I did last time, but I would just say that just want to remind everybody we have an election coming up on April 1st. The way to get information about that, you can preview your ballot, you can find out like where your polling location is, et cetera, by going to myvote.wi.gov. If anybody who's got like a device on them right now, which I think is everybody in the room, you can like Google it now. It should just like pop up if you put in my vote, like in the URL bar, and you just put in like your name, your address, and it takes you to like all the stuff. So a couple things to preview. There is a state constitutional amendment regarding voter ID. So we do have voter ID laws in Wisconsin. There's a push to deepen that into the state, like to amend the Constitution. So that would have to go, that's what the state referendum question is. So there will be two referendum questions on our ballot. There'll be the state of Wisconsin referendum question, which you should absolutely research and, take a stance one way or the other, yes or no, on voter ID and the Constitution. And then the other referendum question is, of course, for the school district of Beloit, which we just heard Ms. Arroyo talk a little bit about this evening. So early voting did start today. You can go to the city of Beloit clerk's office, I think, just like right downtown today, all the way through Friday the 28th. And there is also Sunday voting this Sunday. I believe it is from 11:30 until 3. I should probably double check. 11. I'm lying.
11
It is
to
from
3,
11 to 3.
Yep.
11 to 3. So if that's something you'd like to take advantage of due to work schedules, et cetera, I like to vote early because just get it done. No pressure on that Tuesday. But again, the election is Tuesday, April 1st. I guess there was some misinformation, postcard stuff going around. So wanted to make sure everybody has the right date. And just, I guess, a last note, there are some discussions at the state through committee right now regarding the forward exam, testing language, and all kinds of things like that. And I guess I just want to take a moment to highlight that when it can be very difficult when you're outside of education to take a look at DPI and the algorithms and how they weigh things. I'm really grateful to all of our administrators back there who've done a really nice job unpacking our state report card throughout November through various different lenses. And I am just grateful for the last couple of comments we heard from Mr. Simmons and Mr. Arroyo. just about like the human element of what education is about, or what our district is about. And I guess it probably would behoove us as a board and as a district to, continue to get out there like how we actually do measure growth, because it can be very easy to, look at one number and think one thing and, all this kind of stuff. So I'm just very grateful to our administration for doing such a wonderful job of putting together full and accurate data to reflect that. I think that's all I have. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just, at the state level, there's a couple very important things coming up, and I just wonder if you could touch it. I know Clinton Anderson is having a session coming up, and it's very important that we get out and support what we need from the state to fund us. So if you could just enlighten us, please.
Sure. I mean, so like, are you talking just about like the budget? Yeah. Okay, yeah, totally. So yeah, there are a couple listening sessions. Right. So the 2025-2027 biennial budget will be approved probably like in the middle of the night on June 30th, which is like 3 o'clock in the morning behind closed doors. So that's exciting. But the governor did bring out a budget proposal that was very favorable to public education funding. Even in that context, I will say how it specifically pertains to Beloit. So since 1994, we have been a low revenue district, and that means that no matter whether it's money coming from the state or money coming from the taxpayers, right, it's capped. So like our kids in our district get this much, right, versus other kids in other districts get this much, and that's predetermined from a law that goes back to probably before even some of our kids' parents were born, right, but in 1994. So having said that, it's really important that we show up at those sessions, reach out to, so Mark Spreitzer, Clinton Anderson, our representatives here. So Clint is our assembly person, Mark's our state senator. Unfortunately, none of our representatives, like I think you brought up a great point last time, none of our representatives are on the Joint Finance Committee, which is made up of 16 people. I think about 3 or 4 of them are vocally in support of public education, for reference. And what has been the trend over the years is the governor will come out with a budget that says, yes, we need to, increase low revenue district limits so that we can make things more, equitable across the state. And then it will go to the Joint Finance Committee that will come out with no, we will not do that, and it's just a whole mess. So having said that, regardless of the outcome of our referendum in April, it's going to be really critical that we as a state deepen our commitment to public education. I guess like last note on that, the 2021-2023 budget from the state, for example, provided zero spendable dollar increase to public education. I know even just today, somebody's talking to me about ESSER dollars and all this kind of stuff, which you can find on our website. You could just Google School District Beloit ESSER dollars, it'll pop you right to the page. So you can kind of see how those dollars were spent. But Robin Voss back then had said, we're not going to provide funding to public education on top of what they had before because you guys have all this federal funding. But the purpose of that federal funding was to help bridge opportunities, like I love that we are highlighting in our summer school program, for example, because we do have opportunity gaps, right? Unfortunately, the state decided not to provide, adequate funding for public schools for 2 years, which were arguably the most traumatic, difficult 2 years, in recent memory, right, in public schools. So it's just really critical that, we make our voices heard as a community. Our kids are really depending on us, not just here, but across the state. So thank you, Mr. Hankins, for bringing that up. If anybody would like additional information, I know our legislative update last time had all the information for the candidate or for the listening sessions, and there'll be others across the state as well. So I guess stay tuned for those.
And just to piggyback on that, I know that the Clintons having a listening session on this, and I don't have, it's on my phone in my car. Yeah, at the library or but it's coming up. And also there's a piece of legislation, or no, it's part of the budget to increase funding for special education. It's at a bare minimum right now. They're trying to raise it anywhere from, 25 to, I've heard as high as 70%, which is a very high number. But it's in the budget request. We'll see what it gets whittled down to. But I went to Hedberg Library, and I'm going to go to the next one and make sure that we're represented. And I think my partner here, Megan, will come with me too.
You know it. Yeah, just to confirm, yeah, those dates are Thursday, March 27th. Clint will be at the Beloit Public Library from 5:30 to 6:30. And then I think, let's see, I want to make sure I'm reading this right. And then also Thursday, April 3rd, I think it's the same time, same place. So I guess just, yeah, last note on that, and I promise to stop talking. So since you brought up special education funding, so like with our school district, for example, many of you are probably familiar with, we've been talking a lot about budgets. We're, looking, we've put a referendum on the ballot and things like that. Just for some context, so last year, if the state had just funded special education to the 60%, which was originally promised in the 90s and has never, ever been fulfilled in the history of IDEA or like the Wisconsin's promise to do that, if we had just done that, right, and we did not have the statewide voucher program that has nothing to do with open enrollment, there can be a school district that doesn't have any kids enrolling out of their district, but they still have to take funding out of their own local school district to pay into a private school program across the state. So, it's not, that's on top of any kid who's maybe open enrolling. So with just those two things alone, we would have been, oh man, I just gotta double check the number. It's around like $5 million. I'm gonna lowball it. We would have been like over, like well and above, like would have been able to meet our needs in our district and then some. And if we also didn't have the funding for the charter school, we would have been just shy of $13 million. Like we'd be fine. We like $13 million to like do more stuff for our kids and all this kind of stuff. So it's really critical. Those statutes really have a lot to do with what we can provide to our local kids and to our local families. Federal funding too, right? Like we gave over 1 million meals out during COVID for reference, and all of that came from federal funding, and that's also being attacked right now. So definitely make your voices heard if those are things that you care about.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Clarification on the voting. So early voting runs through next Friday. It's 8:30 to 4 every day except next Friday, the end of the last Friday before the election. They close at 5 o'clock, just FYI. And the polls on April 1st are 7 a.m. to 8 o'clock. And that's that. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move on to board action discussion items. 6A, we have Robinson Elementary is going to be presented by Principal Jennifer Papke. Vice President.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Vice President.
You're not on the ballot yet? That's a yet. Good evening. Good evening. I'm here with Ms. Papke, who will be presenting where we are in continuous improvement planning for Robinson Elementary School, a fabulous Robinson. And with that, just wanted to set the stage for you. Know that last meeting we heard from Hackett, and in knowing that all of our schools have school improvement plans where they do a reading goal and a literacy goal, a math goal, and a social emotional or learning or cultural goal. So, Ms. Papke, I appreciate your presence tonight, and here we go.
All right. I don't see as much blue and gold in the crowd as I had hoped to see, but Fridays can always be a good spirit day for Robinson. We are sharing some slides. I won't read all of the slides for you. You've had a chance to preview those, but I'd like to highlight a few things. Our student count is the highest of the elementary schools in the district. It will be 493 tomorrow and 494 on Thursday. So we are really getting up there to that 500 mark. And the staff is just doing an excellent job of welcoming new students. Many of the new students that come to us most recently have come from other countries and are newcomers to the United States, so helping to make a positive transition for them. When I look at our staff members, I went back and forth about how to count them, but sort of everyone who teaches students in any way, and then the staff members that support that. Amazing fact to know, out of the 10 School District of Beloit staff who have been national board certified over the years, we have Terry Ross in kindergarten, who is the only early childhood generalist certified by the national board. So we love having her there and bringing that experience, and then her ability to share that process with others, so that that's something if they want to follow, to go into that. Our points of pride when we think about our vision really being relationship-centered, community partnerships in any of the places that I have been super important to me, and tying into how we can work together as partners to support our students, because our students do not always exist within the four walls of the school, but how are we giving them opportunities to know and meet people and resources and experience successes in lots of different ways. So bringing people in and getting kids out. I highlighted a few of the points of pride. We have a very collaborative staff. We are not a fully staffed school, so they have worked very tirelessly to make sure that we are still serving students at the highest level through shortages. They're always willing to support the needs of the students. And most recently, we have begun 2 great collaborations with the staff where I meet monthly with our BEA leaders to do some problem solving together. And then we have added a component to our leadership team, which is also a solutions-based team. I did not highlight in blue, but I want to point out that we did improve on our state report card by 9.2 points, which was an increase by 1 star. So we are continuing to grow in areas that we want to. Robinson had not in the past had a family school organization, so this is our first year working with that group. We are teaching them that they are not fundraisers and they are not party planners, but they are people who can be liaisons and other experts to other families in the school to help just build that ripple of access to school staff throughout the building. So we had a very interesting family movie night, and we learned some lessons, and we're looking forward this Friday to our first Loteria game night. So we'll probably have about 100 families that come out for that and looking at having a really good time. 2 things that I love the most are our recognition programs in both academic assemblies and then monthly parades. So students are recognized in assembly or in literacy and math growth during their academic assembly, and the students just get super hyped up to celebrate, and we talk to the students about how any of them could be the next person recognized, and what are just the little things that they can do to get that next level of recognition. And then the PBIS parades, we take our monthly focus from Character Strong. Each student or each classroom gets to nominate a student. They get a t-shirt that says, like, I make this school a better place, and have a parade through the school. Families come. It's just a really positive experience. Even with losing some of the funding that we've had in the past to run student activities, we still have healthy offerings for our students, a minority excellence organization, Just Say No club, student council, art club, a very active Cub Scout group, and even opportunities for student athletics. We're proud of the cultural celebrations that we have. We just celebrated, sorry board, it was on a board meeting night, our 10th annual soul food dinner, where we really wanted to honor the heart of our school, Mr. Saeed Amin. So that was a wonderful chance to have families come together. I would say it sells out. They're free tickets, but the tickets fill up quickly, and people definitely look forward to coming every year. This year, I took a brave challenge to attack Read Across America Week by reaching out to those community connections that I have. And we had over 60 volunteers come in at times that worked in their schedule to read aloud to different classrooms. They could identify the time of day that worked best for them, the grade level that they might want to teach to. Lots of them brought a favorite book of their own. Some wanted a book ready for them to read, but everyone had a really good time with it. So there's a couple pictures from that event. The picture up on the top left was from our soul food dinner. What was super cool was the Nightingales and the fellas came to perform And our elementary MEO students got to sit with some of the kiddos from those groups who were in MEO at the high school and in MEO when they were in elementary school. So they got to kind of see what they're building up to, what the opportunities are. And then down here at the head of the table, there's our guest of honor, Mr. Saeed. So just want to make sure he gets all the shout outs that he deserves. Our goals, much like any of the other schools, are to have an academic focus in literacy and biliteracy and an academic focus in math, and then take a social, emotional, behavioral focus. So again, I won't read through all of this, but we looked at what is an achievable goal, what is something that we can do within the time period, and what tools are we going to use. And we wanted to focus on the tools that our students are using day to day in their instruction. We have some measurements that will be taken on map tests that happen a couple times a year or the year-to-year forward exam. But what is the growth that we're seeing students doing in the American Reading Company work and the assessments that they do within that, because that's going to give the truest picture of their day-to-day performance. So we'll look at some data there. This is last year's forward data. We started forward today. So at the end of the year or into the summer, when we have this year's data, I can update these slides to give you a year-to-year comparison. Some of the strategies that we're using to increase student proficiency is to do some literacy learning walks with our academic coaches, our interventionists, and then the grade level teachers, where they can be in other classrooms and gain new strategies and skills from where they go, and then see what reading looks like at different levels as well. And then as we've taken on this large activity with Act 20 assessment going on, we are committed to taking the data that we receive and using it to guide our student growth, not just check, we did what we were supposed to do. This slide shows that by grade level, you see sort of the students in the red, yellow, and green categories. Compared to last year, I feel like this one changed on me. So grades K, 1, and 3 are definitely showing an increase. Grade 2 had a bit of a decrease, but I will note that that was the group that made the most growth last year. So we know some years it's going to be a strong year for that student or for that group of students, and some years it might not be their year, but the teachers are still giving them everything they can. They don't stop here and say, well, we didn't go as far as we were going to, so let's just try again next time. They just keep going, and this all drives the tier 2 interventions that they need. They still get those in the classroom from their regular teacher, so there's already an established relationship, and then it determines the number of times that they're conferencing with their teacher during the week, which then really drills into the specific power goals that they're working on. And then this is a report that will give us specifically what those power goals are, what the growth they're making, and then how we plan out those small groups. When we look at our math benchmark data, if you go back to what was listed as the foundational goal, we were looking at making an increase from 31 to 36% of students proficient. And this is that midway point that we're at about 32%. So we're making a little growth, but we know that we are making growth and still aiming to reach that 36 by the last measurement in the spring. The increases that you see here grows year by year, naturally, as students kind of gain more reading skills, but you see bigger leaps by the grade level as students are becoming more competent and confident readers. When they're in third grade, they're still acquiring a lot of their reading skills, a lot of their fluency and things like that. By fifth grade, you see a lot more independent readers, self-selection of books. They're still able to be guided into books that would be most appropriate for their struggle to get them moving a little bit more, but you're seeing different growth because they're attacking reading in a different way, and now it's that transition to I'm enjoying reading, now let me find those books that I like and keep reading those ones. So this is an overview of the math goal. Again, growth from 16% proficient to 30% proficient. Again, right now we just have last year's forward data, and we'll give an update of what we do when those scores come, but we're using similar to doing some group observations and reading walks together. We're also doing math learning walks with our coaches. And the Eureka Math Squared has been a really positive experience for us. And students love the competition that they can have within Imagine Math, not even recognizing how tailored that is to their individual needs. They just like the fun and competition of it, so. This one in math, again, we were looking from an increase from 16 to 30, and at this point, we're at 25. So in math, we are getting closer to that final end goal for the end of the year. And then this just is another view by grade level. Our social emotional behavioral goal is on attendance. And unfortunately, our attendance did drop below where we were last year. But on the next page, you'll see that there's an area where we are making some growth. And so one thing that we're implementing now to the end of the year is to recognize every single student who has 95% attendance. And when students start seeing, like, this is a celebration, this is an opportunity, this is, honestly, the assistant principal, you have to see me for behavior, you have to see me for missing school and things like that. How do we make sure we're getting kids notice who are doing the things that we want replicated, and we're gonna get that replication through celebration. So we're gonna add that into our quarterly assemblies and do some positive recognition with them. So this is where you see a bit of a change in the trend in attendance.
And chronic absenteeism getting better at the bottom.
Yeah. So I picked a picture for the end of the PBIS parade because I just think it's such a positive energy experience. The parents line the hall, all the classroom students come out and line outside their classrooms. We pick a couple fun songs, but they are just so proud to walk through and be recognized for what they're doing. And I just want to have one little brag moment because our SEB goal did not have to do with discipline. I will say that I am a firm believer that discipline does need to be addressed and recorded and documented and handled appropriately. I found out yesterday in a training that 82% of our students have not received any discipline referrals this year. So that was wonderful to hear because, again, I feel like a lot of my time is spent with that other 18% and working on decreasing repeat behaviors. But what are we going to do to make sure that we set these 82% up as role models and people who other students can look to? So thank you for letting me share, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Pappy. Anybody have any questions? Board Member Miller.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Papke. That was wonderful. I really appreciated the time that you took to present that to all of us. I just wanted to, I want a couple of comments and a question. I love that you provided some context for multiple metrics. I think that we do these board meetings and we get this kind of like snapshot piece, like reports and information. But like, I think this is, and so was Mr. McReynolds' Hackett presentation, a good reminder that there's like this overarching vision, and then everybody kind of has that role to use like appropriate, get all the information that we need, tell us what we need to know about the kids, how to meet their needs, and like kind of move us forward and forward and forward. So I thought that was really nice. I really appreciated the cohesion between your presentation and Mr. McReynolds. For example, like the literacy learning walks are something that looks like it's happening across the district, and like that's really beneficial for all the reasons that you said, I'm sure, and more. And I guess I also really appreciated the opportunity for the board and for the community to get a little like snapshot of like, what does that continuous improvement look like? Like I really appreciated how you explained through like, okay, so we're looking at this, we like what we're seeing here. This isn't quite what we were looking for, so here's what we're going to do to address that, like, and here are the changes that we're making. So definitely appreciated that. I'm just wondering, too, could you talk a little bit more about, like, you talked about, like, kindergarten, first and third grade, and then there's kind of that second grade winter dip. Can you, like, help, just for the sake of clarity and understanding for all of us who aren't, like, in the classrooms, like, what does that type of, like, intervention look like? Like, what are things that teachers do that change? Because I thought you did a really nice job saying, we're not just going to stop and say, oh, well, we're going to keep going. Can you talk a little bit more about, like, what does that look like at Robinson?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
So we know that the students have the best chance for success with someone that they already have that established relationship with in the classroom. We also know that there's great benefit to a pull-out intervention, but we want to have that first level of intervention happening from the classroom teacher, because what he or she will do is pull out from what they're already doing, tighten the focus, pull out the skills that are really uniquely needed for that child or that small group of children to get them kind of where they need to be, give them that small group practice, and then the data team is able to look at, okay, so when we've measured this over a few weeks, is the intervention working? Great, keep doing what? Don't stop. Is the intervention not working? Let's stop. Let's come up with another intervention and try something new. So that's one way that we look at that. And then over a longer period of time, then it becomes honestly a really hard conversation when we have to figure out who's going to really receive Tier 3 intervention from one interventionist in a school that has more needs than we can fill. So really looking at, again, if I'm spotlighting these teachers because they want to help each other and they want to support each other, they're going to find creative ways to get to those kids. One of the things that we're going to offer after spring break is some after-school tutoring for students that are not necessarily in the threshold to get the intervention but still need some help. So again, they come up with creative ideas and we do them and go from there.
No, thank you so much for help, kind of elaborating on that. And I just want to congratulate you and your school, like on your growth. It's really exciting to go up like a star and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's got to be very affirming. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you. And I can only thank the people that came before me because I just arrived and then the star was there.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Whoa. Mrs. Papke?
Anybody else?
Board Member Schneider, nothing? Okay, well, I have a couple comments.
Yeah, of course.
And some questions.
Sure.
So, so you're going to do tutoring
Yes.
after school,
Yes.
person to person?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I love that. I love to hear that. You did a good job with the presentation.
Thank
I just have a couple questions. So on your teachers, does that include paras? You're 33, on page 2, you had
The
33.
33 is the classroom teachers. The 60-ish number
Includes
includes the
the
support staff.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you. And you mentioned Cub Scouts, and 2 weeks ago, we heard about the Girl Scouts because they did the Pledge to Allegiance. You guys ought to get together with
We had 2 of our Cub Scouts at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay,
we had
you're
2
right,
brothers.
you're right, you did.
We had 2 brothers that came and did it.
My suggestion is you guys get together, you come up with a Girl Scout troop and let them come up with a Cub
What
Scout.
we need to bring are our female Cub Scout members, because now it is open to both. And we saw boys and girls with the most creative cars in the Pinewood Derby on Saturday. So, yeah, maybe we need to bring them in to do the pledge and show off their wheels.
Okay, good. You, one bullet point you showed, tutoring partnership with River of Life Church. How did that start? Can you share a little bit about that?
From a staff member
Staff
who's
member?
a member of the church
Okay,
there.
cool.
And she
And they're
helped facilitate that.
helping tutor?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, and she's coming she comes and picks up a group of 4th and 5th graders. They
Awesome.
all get excited to go with her every week.
Okay.
So it's
Good.
been fun.
On the benchmarks for reading and math, I just have a couple of questions, and just, Mrs. Mortek, this might kind of go for all of you. When you're comparing, 32%, 0.2 average or above, what is average, by the way?
So I will talk a little more about that in our MAPS presentation, but it's based on percentile ranking.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've got the 3rd, 4th, and 5th mentioned, and I like that they're going up. So is it possible to compare backwards to the guys the kids that are in the 4th grade and 5th grade? What did they do when they were in the 3rd grade? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, the MAP scores from the program, I'd have to go into it through the rep, but we could go back last year and then look at how the 3rd graders, the 4th graders, and the 5th graders scored and then compare it. Yeah. And we want to look at year after year growth. And then we also have to recognize sometimes it's apples to oranges because it's not the same group of kids. But I do like to look at that longitudinal data, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Mrs. Papke.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is 6B, Food Service DPI Administrative Review. Headed by Mrs. Dawn Smith. Yes. I think the mic's off. There you go. Thank you.
Director of Food and Nutrition for the School District of Beloit. Sarah Warren. I am the Food Service Director with Chartwells. So I just want to clarify what the administrative review is. It's really more of a financial review of food service because we take so much money from the federal government. They just want to make sure that the money that's coming in is rightfully ours. So the few things that they found in, like at the high school when they didn't have, like two students didn't take a fruit. Well, we couldn't take money for that because it's required that they take a fruit. So they also, this was a review from 23-24 to 24-25 to the date of January 25th, I think. So it was quite a long time that they looked at this. So I'm going to give you an update on the school district part of it. So we did find an error that we were able to look at in regard to 705 under the FSA does not have adequate internal controls and oversights of federal fund. The food of $558.52 was purchased by Chartwells, which was not, it was actually purchased by me. So Mrs. Elwood was able to find that. The vending machine that was charged for $736.61 was in fact a charge, but then they didn't take into consideration all the revenue from that vending machine actually came back into Fund 50. So instead of us owing the $1,200 and some dollars, we owe $492. So that can't be out of Fund 50 because that was in fact, Chartwells did in fact pay for that. So the way that our contract works with Chartwells is we're a P&L account, but we're a meal rate. So most school districts are a fee, which means that the school district owns everything. They own all the food, they own everything. And then what happens is it's reimbursed, that we actually reimburse them just for an administration fee. And we had that for I've been here 34 years. So the first probably 10 years, we had a fee account. The only bad thing for me, and of course I always worked for a management company, was I looked at it like, well, if you're a management company, you should know how to run your business. And so that actually laid on the school district if we weren't making any money. So I went to DPI and said, we need to make this a P&L. So the next time it went out for bid, we did make a P&L account. Food service has, since I've been here, we have not been in the negative at all. We've always had a pretty hefty fund balance. But Chartwell's has been here about a year and a half. We had Aramark, of course, for 25 years. I did work for them for 25 years. And we were ready for a change. I mean, we were just ready for a change. We had Chartwell's the 8 years before that I did work for. And then, of course, during COVID, you know, things got a little wacky, and they said, oh, we need somebody here representing the district. So I did want to just say that when we were talking, Board Member Hankins, we were talking about our reviews. So the DPI, the administration review, is different than a food safety and sanitation review. We do have those twice a year. And Sarah will tell you about how many employees she has that are ServSafe certified, so that you can see that it's kind of two different things. So, and then pretty much everything is updated and loaded into DPI. We have till the 31st. There's two things that are outstanding that we have to wait for tomorrow because they wanted 30 days of consecutive numbers. And so she'll get that in tomorrow. And then the civil rights, of course, was the policy that we needed to change. We didn't have the whole non-discrimination policy in the policies, so we had to change those. And then in the wellness policy, we had to add all foods sold in schools so that people would know that, you know, fundraisers and things like that. And of course, Mrs. Pels took care of the fundraising on that side. And I mean, pretty much for the district, that was really all they found for the district. And then I'll let Sarah talk about where we were on the Chartwell side. Here. Okay. So I just put you
Right here?
what you've done here.
Oh, okay. All right, so at Gaston Elementary, which was an amazing review, according to the auditor, there was an issue with meal counting and claiming. The meal counting and claiming system did not result in an accurate meal count by eligibility, and this was specifically in one particular 5K classroom. Cards were handed to the teacher. The students would take the meal, but the teacher did not verify that the students had actually taken a fully reimbursable meal. So the corrective action consisted of we had to correct the meal counting process, and we needed to submit 30 consecutive days of the meal counts with the corresponding edit checks. So meal counts from February 5th through March 19th will be submitted tomorrow afternoon, end of business, along with the edit checks, AccuClaim. And then along with Principal Fonda Lewis, she has received and taken the Offer versus Serve online training course through DPI with directions to review with the 5K teacher. And then myself and the Assistant Director, Holly Goodwin, we are responsible for spot checking monthly to ensure that they are in compliance. Regarding the meal components and the quantities, so with the food service program, we are required to offer 2 different fat levels of milk. So we have the 1% and we have the skim milk. The skim milk is called the golden milk, according to the students. So we have to make sure that all of our breakfast carts are fully stocked and loaded with both fat levels. Unfortunately, one cart ran out of the 1% milk at the end of the service period, leaving only one milk choice. So the corrective action with that was just submitting a statement of understanding that 2 milk varieties have to be made available to students in the future. So Chartwell's employees understand the importance of ensuring milk varieties on each of the cart. On March 4th, we did train all staff site to ensure the understanding. We brought all of the staff members in to the high school, and we went through a very intense and extensive offer versus serve training. Lots of Q&A, lots of really good questions on their part. And we also had to contact the dairy company because they had been erroneously not giving us enough of that necessary milk. So we are ordering more skim milk so that we have plenty for breakfast and lunch, as well as we'll be spot checking by Dawn, myself, and Holly Goodwin. Incomplete breakfast and lunch production records during the review week with Gaston, Merrill, and the Beloit Memorial High School. The issue that we were experiencing, while we have to provide the quantity prepared for these documents, this document is used for the entire kitchen. Staff utilize it to be able to understand how much food that needs to be prepped, how much food was served by the end of the day, and to make sure that those production records are actually matching our edit checks, as well as with those edit checks, what is going into the meal claiming system, so that everything balances out. There was a column, bulk quantity. So even though we were providing the quantity prepared, which was in individual pieces, the district is looking for a more bulk amount. So instead of we made 150 chicken patty sandwiches, they wanted to know how many cases we were actually producing. So that has been updated, and we have been training the staff with how to correctly fill out the production records. One of the things that I have seen not only in this state but in Illinois is site-specific SOPs, standard operating procedures, food safety guides. Chartwell's and Compass Group, we provide to all of our accounts probably a 5,000-page binder of every possible contingency plan, actionable item, SOP regarding food safety and handling and storage and ordering and shipping and preparing and cooking, and you get the idea. But what the auditor was requesting was that we made site-specific SOP and food safety guides for those specific schools, just to make it easier for them to read, because if you're going to be brushing through 5,000 pages, you've already lost me. But if, you can easily go through tab 2, tab 3, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for the frontline staff to be able to identify what the correct procedure is and just follow the SOPs that are required. So anyway, long story short, those SOPs, they've been updated. And so all of our sites are now do have the correct SOP food safety manuals available specifically for whether you're a satellite kitchen, a cooking kitchen, or a production site. Let's see. Over at Merrill, there was an issue with meal counting and claiming with one classroom. This was the special ed classroom. The lunch tickets that were taken to the cafeteria in the morning, indicating which student is here and having lunch. The teacher took the student's orders by taking pictures, and that is okay. But on this day, one student did happen to leave school early that day, but that additional meal had not been removed from that morning order, and the meal was not returned. Therefore, the counting and claiming of that additional meal was split between the students. So that additional meal had just been parceled out to the students instead of it going back to the kitchen or being or the kitchen being notified, hey, we don't need this meal. So the corrective action with that was the meal counting process in the classroom is when students need track the meal. We do have to submit 30 consecutive operating days of meal counts and edit checks, and tomorrow, by end of business, those meal counts and edit checks will be uploaded. And moving forward, the standard operating procedure is that the order for the teacher's classroom is to give the food service staff in the morning. The lead food service worker then delivers to the classroom and then verifies that all of the students are there as she collects the tickets. That is the proper protocol for a satellite or a remote POS, which is an acronym for point of service. And let's see, also at Merrill, there was a non-reimbursable meals were served during lunch and a 3K meal program. Two students did not take the required quarter cup of fruit, vegetable, or a combination. Meals are served family style. So students within the 3K program, it's straight serve. So they need to take everything that is menued on the item instead of giving them the option to take those green beans or just take something. But no, all of those items do have to be on those little tiny plates for those students to at least take a bite. Just try 2 bites. That I do remember the teacher saying it's a 2-bite rule in this classroom. You have to at least try 2 bites. But unfortunately, there were some students that did not take, I'm not saying 2 students, 2 students did not take the required quarter cup of fruit and vegetable. So moving forward, students in 3K, they have to take all the components. They may refuse to eat something that they don't want, but it has to be on their plate. That's the requirement. At the high school, the non-reimbursable meals during lunch service under offer versus serve, students must select 3 complete components of at least a half a cup of fruit, vegetable, or a combination for a reimbursable meal. The one item that you have to have on your tray, no matter what, is either a half a cup of fruit or a half a cup of vegetable. That is just the golden standard. And it was observed in the deli bar that 2 students did not have that required component, either a fruit or a vegetable. We did not count those meals for the claim. They were removed and stricken automatically, but it was noted by the auditors that that had taken place. On March 4th, we did conduct, like I said prior, a very intensive offer versus serve training, and we did have to have signatures of all of those that were in attendance on a roster. So during the training, the staff needed to be made aware that students must take a fruit, a vegetable, or a combination, and they cannot leave without the required components. It does pose a challenge once in a while, but we do have cashiers that are very well versed in how to convince our students to take a proper selection. We have a really nice fresh fruit and vegetable salad bar, and it's very few students that are not trained, because these rules have been in place since, I want to say, 2008, and so anybody that has come up knows, okay, you got to take a fruit or a vegetable, but you do have some, not many, that just steadfastly refuse. I am not taking it. And because we do not, we can't claim that meal, so the students just take that sandwich or that slice of pizza and just go ahead and go. We also, in the deli bar, it was observed that the deli meat was underportioned. So what we needed to do was make sure that our staff in the deli bar understood the production records, understood the recipes, and were trained on how to use the scales for weights and measurements to make sure that that slice of turkey, they were actually getting a full 2 ounces of meat alternative. So we needed to complete a portion size study for our deli meat, as well as the taco meat for the Sono line, and we retrained the staff. We went through the serving utensils, like I said, as well as the scales and measurements. So that has also been uploaded to DPI for their approval. And then, it's always train, train, train. We're always training and retraining and retraining and retraining. So it is an ongoing process. We try to implore the importance of the staff understanding that measurements are important because it affects diets, it affects, of course, food cost, it affects if you have a diabetic, it's going to affect, the carb counts that they're dealing with. It affects just the overall standardized recipe and portion control. That's what we live and breathe on. So it's really important that they understand that they are the front line, and that it's because of what they are doing on a day-to-day basis with feeding these kids that we have to make sure that these rules are followed and adhered by according to the USDA and the DPI. Something that I do want to highlight, Dawn had mentioned that we do receive every school receives 2 health department inspections a year. That is a state mandate and a USDA mandate. We do have currently 50% of our staff is ServSafe Manager certified. So 58%, so I have 50% of our staff is ServSafe certified, which means that 29 out of my 58 part-time and full-time employees, 50% of them are ServSafe certified. This is really important because to be a lead and to be a cook in any position, you have to understand food handling. You have to understand hot and cold temperatures. You have to understand that, those thermometers really, really are important. You can get a lot of people sick really, really quickly just by negligence. And so to have so many people that we have been able to put through the ServSafe certification process, I think speaks volumes to Holly Goodwin, who is not here right now, but she is our ServSafe proctor and instructor. But she has done a tremendous job getting our staff certified. Now, something that I do have on my agenda moving forward is we do have a program called Fair Check. Fair Check certification is an allergy certification. We all know that there are students that suffer from food allergies all across the board. You've got the 8 allergens that are just really, really scary to deal with. But it is my goal that we do have 100% Fair Check allergy certification, 100%. All of our staff and associates working with the food and serving our students will be Fair Check allergy certified. And let's see. Another thing to boast about is, so yesterday we had, on March 17th at the high school, we did have ServSafe Manager training. We had 11 come to that class, 6 of them passed, and then on top of that, we had an additional 5 ladies that will be taking the online course, but in their native language. So English is not their preferred language. We're offering it to them in Spanish, and I think that not only does that help, strengthen the Chartwell's team, but it helps the community as well by being able to make this available to the Hispanic residents and employees of Beloit. And that will be all. Any questions?
Do any board members have any questions? Mrs. Levy?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the thorough presentation. Much appreciated. Quick question, and I know that there are certain requirements with what a child needs to take in order for us to count that meal.
Yes.
Are there any guidelines on food waste? And I know temperature and serve safe and all of that is so important, but if we are not able to account a meal and there's additional food, so many kids in our district are eligible for free and reduced lunch, which means that there may be food insecurity there. Are we able to, if there is a surplus that would otherwise not be used, to serve that to students possibly after school on their way out? Is there any process for an option like that?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. At one point, the high school did have a love food, hate waste table, a share table of sorts. So the students would come through the line, they would grab their breakfast items, whatever they didn't want, they would leave it on the cart. So anybody that would want it could come and take it. The issue that we experience is time and temperature abuse. And so with the time and temperature abuse, pulling it back into the kitchen, taking it back out, trying to recirculate it into the inventory, it gets very tricky, as well as being able to offer it up to the school setting. It can get very tricky with just food safety concerns. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but we do have to dispose of those meals.
And I understand for like hot foods or things like that, but non-perishable items, like if it's apples or cereal or granola bars, or are you able, has that program been discontinued? Or are you able to do that on discontinued? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other board questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of on the same wavelength, that I'm not critiquing at all. I know from being in the food service and actually working in school lunch programs, an inordinate amount of waste, which is, I'm not blaming Chartwell's. I know kids take it and throw it away. It's just, there's just no way to resurrect that. It's just, it's embarrassing how much goes, and you guys know when you empty the trash, it's like,
Yeah.
There's no way to.
I can speak on that.
Go ahead.
When I used to work for Chicago Public Schools, and I did a waste study, one of the schools on the southwest side, 5 days, and I told all the students, if you're not going to eat your fruit, leave it on the table, because I wanted to count. And at the end of the week, sad but say, but it was 7 cases of bananas that were going into the trash. So that is, I get it, absolutely. That's the frustrating piece.
Well, one of the things that we talked to DPI about, because we do have a share table at the high school, which they absolutely hated. They wanted to turn their head. But we do have pantries at 3 of our schools. So we are kind of working with DPI to see how can we at least do the fresh fruits and vegetables or anything that's packaged, can we put it in the pantry? Because then we know, because the pantries are being used at those 3 sites. So we're looking at that. The other part is we have a blast chiller at Cunningham. So anything that we had that we could blast chill, it actually freezes it within like minutes. So to use it at a different time, if that's what we needed to do. I mean, we're not crazy about any leftovers. We're not crazy about reheating them. It's just poor quality. But if we could blast chill something and we were able to put it in the pantry, we're working with DPI to see, can we do this? because we agree that, you know, we hate seeing it in the trash too. And so do our custodians, because we hear a lot of that.
And a little bit of follow-up, I'm just asking because I don't know. If you put something on a plate, it's gone, you know, you can't do anything. But if you have like a pan of whatever, peas, beans, even the hot dish, can you refrigerate it and reuse it sometime in the future or freeze it? If it's not been dished out yet?
Yes, yes, you can. However, I try to err on the side of caution when it comes to quality. So if we're dealing with something that has been cooked, put on the serving line, sat on the serving line, and then we're going to drop that temperature, and then you're going to put it in the cooler, and you're going to put it back into the oven to heat it back up. I'm sure it's fine, but it's not pretty to look at. And I love food, so it's
But I
very
think we
important
deserve
about
better, too.
yeah.
I mean, I feel
But
like our kids
presentation
just need-
and kids pick their food with their eyes. So I want them to eat green peas, not brown peas. But I absolutely get what you're saying. I know.
Megan Miller?
You know, in the interest of time, I'll just forward questions. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I do have one more question. So the food that goes in the trash, do you know if any school districts have any sort of composting programs?
I do not offhand.
So
Dawn
I can
probably
speak
does.
to that. We did compost with the Public Works for probably 2 or 3 years. What we would do is all that food would go into 5-gallon buckets, and then our drivers would take it out and they would pour it into this vat, because we went through the wastewater to see how this worked. But our driver got a terrible bacterial infection doing it, all his hands and everything from this food, so we had to discontinue it. But we did love doing it.
Wow. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have the fall-winter benchmark map scores. We have Teresa Moratek presenting, and the purpose for this is MAP is an adapted online assessment that is norm-referenced and used to inform instructional practices and student learning. The key focus for MAP is growth. Each student is assigned a projected growth score based on the fall RIT scale. We utilize MAP for students in grades 3 through 12. In grades 8 through 12, the data only represents students that are selected for intentional purposes. The reports indicate the academic outcomes within a range: low, low average, 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 high average, and high. Ms. Moratek.
Thank you. And on the board recs that that's the description that board president just read, and so that's the top paragraph of this slide as well. So thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. The second paragraph just shows the different ways that SDB utilizes it. So we utilize it in grades 3 through 7 to look at student growth in literacy and math. And this can be taken up to 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And then we also, in the upper grades, again, pull students for interventions. So when we pull the data district-wide, it's not all of the students in grades 8 through 12. So I attempted to pull together enough slides to try to give a comprehensive overview of MAP and what it is. And if there's additional information you're looking for, I'll be happy to follow up. Sometimes in these presentations, it's hard to gauge what exactly folks are looking for or interested in, and then how much is too much data, how much is not enough data. So I am happy to follow up if there are additional questions. So this first slide just gives an overall comparison to where we were in fall, which is in blue of last year, and to where we started the year, and then where we were in winter, where we were last year, and then overall where we are this year in reading. And the other piece that I wanted to address is back here where it talks about how the reports are looking at low, low average, average, high average, and high. Earlier when one of our schools were presenting, Mr. Nichols had a question, kind of like, what does that mean? And so when we look at this slide, this is our fall to winter. The first bar graph up at the top shows where the students scored proficiency-wise in fall, and then where they are in winter. And so they pretty much stayed the same. That doesn't mean that there wasn't any growth. It means where they're expected to be this time in fall and where they're expected to be this time in winter. We would like to see more kids proficient in winter than in fall. However, they didn't lose growth because the RIT score for that grade level increases as the year goes on. So if they start the year with an expected RIT score of 205, they may be expected to end the year at a 210. Mid-year, they might be expected to be at 208, if that makes sense. The other thing that's important to understand about MAP is this is an internal assessment that we use to inform instructional practice, and really it's effective when classroom teachers look at it and they look at students individually to see how they're growing, because there is a projected growth, and then how schools can look at it. This particular report, they break it into quintiles. So if you picture a classic bell curve, it's 20th, 20th, 20th percentile groups, right? So in the lowest percentile group, which is the red, it's 0 to 20th. Then you go 21st to 40th, 41st to 60th, 61st to so on. Similar in the bell curve theory would be like if we did a random sampling and we filled this room with 100 people and everybody in this room took a state standardized test, or in this case, a benchmark assessment. How statistically the theory says is you would all shake out into these different quintiles. We would have people that are below average, we would have people that are average, and we'd have people that are above average. And that's the theory of the bell curve. Many people in education over time have pushed back against this approach for different reasons, but this is the way that this assessment works. And so statistically, what we would like to see is more of our students in yellow and yellow, blue, green, and blue, right? And so we would say that this right now, if you drew this on a bell curve, is statistically negatively left skewed, because we're still seeing most of our students in those red and orange. And so our goal is to move the data to the yellow, green, and blue. In MAPS, the yellow, which I'm calling average, reaches down to the 41st to the 60th percentile. Ideally, we would look at 50 percentile and above, but it just doesn't shake out that way. So I grabbed the yellow group. The other thing to know about MAPS, we have a new rep, and I actually had a meeting with her today. The MAPS is it's nationally normed, so these are kids across the country, is how they determine these RIT level scores and where kids should be at grade level. Post-COVID, the national RIT score has dropped, has decreased, just like we saw in NAEP and other national assessments. So NWEA is doing a national norms study, and they'll come out with new level sets next year in 2025 to give a more appropriate account of where students are really at from a norm referenced place post-COVID. So that will be coming out. And then in additional to that, because we have new state or updated state standards and updated cut scores, they have to then follow up with states that have changes to do a linking study, because you can use these reports to give you some projection into where you might test in a state standardized test. And so there's some work that's happening with NWA and MAPS and any other, like STAR, any other benchmark type of company that uses a nationally norm referenced assessment.
Mrs. Moratek, do you want questions as
Sure.
you're going through these, or at the end?
I think maybe at the end.
Oh.
I know that was a lot, and so I'll go through just the data and then take questions at the end. Is that okay with you?
It is. I do have one question about the layout of this.
Sure.
The orange dots or ovals at the start of the colored line, is that the 50th percentile or the median percentile for this group of students?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
And so in what you'll see when you look from fall to winter is whether we're moving up or we're moving down. And so in this case, they stayed the same percentile rank. Yes, great question. Here in our reading, it is noted here that we did fall a couple percentage points in our third grade reading based on our fall benchmark to our winter benchmark. And so this is an area of need of improvement as we continue to work on third grade proficiency. Something that you often see in these types of assessments is that the students are really beginning to lean into comprehension, and this is what MAPS is all about. Early in reading initiatives, they used to say in the early grades, you're learning to read to learn. When Common Core came out, they challenged that notion in the sense of kids should always be reading to learn. But really in those earlier years, there is a transition that happens. I'm just trying to learn the decoding and the actual code of reading, learning to read. And then once I can, and I have fluency, then now I'm working on my comprehension, reading to learn. And that's where that kind of phrase comes from. And this is our winter map in grades 3 through 5. So you see where I have the 29.3 average, 33, and then the 36.6 average. That is just simply the sum of the yellow, green, and blue columns because of that bell curve percentile ranking, looking at it. I'm thinking that when they do this study, that the proficiency cut scores will be decreased because the nation itself has dropped in outcomes as it's recovering. It feels like COVID is far away, but it's understanding that across our country, it's still, the students that were part of that are still in our system. And then this is for our map in grades 6 through 7. So we have 36.2 and then 29 in the winter for our 7th grade. I provided some demographics, just the racial and ethnic breakups. If you're interested in seeing further demographic groupings like EL students or students with special needs, those types of things, I'll be happy to provide that for you. I just didn't in this particular presentation. Again, sometimes it's hard to identify what's all the information that we're interested in. And another thing that I like to do when I present this is to look at the all group. We want to look at how are we on an average. So 32% is all of the students together, and then we can see how the different racial and ethnic groups shook out. And here's our map. Overall, the percentage of students average or above scored higher in fall and winter this year than in last year. So this is good because we're beginning to see growth within the system. So last year's students didn't score as well as this year's students. For math, exciting here, we did improve proficiency, the number of students that met their proficiency level by 3 points. So similar to the reading, everybody moved up, well, most kids moved up for red scores, but even more in this case met the proficiency that was expected for winter. And here's the MAP scores for grades 3 through 5, and again, the averages. We can still see that high need for improvement in that red first percentile group is still work that we need as a district. Grade 6th and 7th average for MAP in math. And then this is the racial and ethnic groupings. I wanted to include this slide because it just brings a little more of a rounded picture of our middle schools because I have the 6th and 7th grade reading and map data. So I wanted to include this slide just to show you. So they take the pre-ACT twice a year in fall and in spring. And so you'll expect the spring scores to be higher than the fall scores because it's the same, right? Basically the same assessment. And so something that is exciting here is if you look at the percentage of students that were proficient last year in math, are not as high as the students this year fall. So that means our 8th graders this year are outperforming the 8th graders last spring. So they are a few months ahead in growth. And just some big ideas that I pulled from looking at the data, that individual student growth continues to be a focus. The reading scores stayed the same throughout fall and winter. However, grade 3 scores lost growth by 2 percentage points. So that's definitely a conversation that we need to have with our elementary schools and reflecting in their data. The math scores showed growth in comparison to fall to winter by 3 percentage points, so we're on a steady growth there. I thought about how the board set goals for 2 percentage increases on the forward exam. So this is good in math because if we're internally showing some growth, hopefully then that'll translate to those board goals in the standardized test. Different assessments, different testing environments for those. However, it's good to see internal data moving. There are persistent unequal academic outcomes across demographic groupings by race and ethnicity in both reading and math. So that continues to be a focus of ours within our buildings. And how are we having universal goals for all, but then having targeted strategies to make sure that all of our students, and that connects to the next bullet. There continues to be a focus on strengthening our core instructional practices with our teachers, and that's through our coaching that we do, the learning walks that we're doing, along with our equitable multiple levels of systems of support, EMLSS. I have to slow down there to make sure that I say it right. Just this week, on Monday, when we had professional learning, as I've mentioned to the board before, we now have a data dashboard that's being used district-wide, frontline student analytics, and we launched that this summer. And we've been doing a gradual training in bringing people into the loop so that it's more institutionalized and sustainable over time. There's an implementation plan there. And so on Monday, we included several staff in building teams to begin to dig into that data and use that tool. And when we see those students that are still in that first quintile, how are we meeting their needs? And so really strengthening our systems and structures that we have in place for our MLSSS, which is differentiated levels of support, I believe will help to move our data so that it's no longer negatively left skewed bell curve, but more towards the right side. So that's some work still that our district is aware of and we are currently working on to address. And then the final piece is just to, which is good, the pre-ACT is indicating growth and proficiency levels across core and content areas. This is a good predictor of potential increases in ACT scores in the future if growth continues as our 8th graders move into the high school level. As we know, 2 years ago, we had growth in the ACT, and then last year we dipped down in the ACT. So I'm looking forward to seeing the pre-ACT scores improving, which they have had improvement on, because as our students get to that 11th grade year where they take the ACT, I'm hoping that this pre-ACT will help to be a predictor. And that's also something new that we started in our district 2 years ago. And so getting teachers to reflect on the pre-ACT and instructional practices in grades 8, starting in 8, and then also now in 9 and 10, I think will really help to improve that ACT score overall. Any questions?
Are there any questions? Mr. Hankins, or you? Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Mortek.
You're welcome.
We hear a lot of talk about COVID, and if a student entered let's go post-COVID, and if a student came into our district post-COVID as a 3 or 4 year old, where would they be now? 3rd grade?
I think
so
that's
that was
right,
in
yeah.
20.
Yes.
So these scores are post-COVID of third graders?
Yes and no. Something that has really been discovered is actually the pre years, so like 0 to 3, it's had significant impact because a lot of children at that time were not in daycares or in learning environments. So if you talk to early childhood people, they speak on this quite a lot about their lived experiences, that students coming in as 4-year-olds are not where they were pre-COVID because they spent so much time at home and they didn't have the same type of socialization and things that happen in 0 to 3 programs.
All right, be that as it may, when will you look at it and say, okay, these kids are out of pre-COVID or post-COVID? I mean, true, another 3 years? Is that what you're saying?
I think when they move out of our system, right? So COVID is going to be here until our students move out of our 12th grade. It doesn't mean that we're not going to work on recovering and acceleration, which we have been. But I think if you look at the national research on it, it's having long-standing effects.
Well, I'm just talking about that class. That class, and you're looking at, I've learned since being on the board, and in fact, you've enlightened me a lot on third grade scores are indicative, and DPI looks hard at DPI
they are
scores. And they being the springboard for further education, I'm kind of disheartened because we heard in the fall that you were excited about this and that and these programs, and to see these slip, I'm just questioning, and I know you're very aware of it. I'm not trying to grandstand or anything.
No, and I appreciate that, which is why I wanted to call it out tonight in the presentation. And it's also important, we always say best practice is the triangulation of data. So where we're seeing growth in our foundational skills on our ERLA, Ms. Papke referenced that tonight when she said the ARC materials, that's ERLA's assessment. We are seeing growth on students meeting their benchmark there. This is another assessment where they didn't meet all of the growth on that particular day. And it doesn't mean I'm invalidating it. It just means it's another measure to say we still have work to do.
And I know I realize you're going to be testing again. So we still got a little bit of time to make some improvement.
Yeah.
In your professional opinion, are you seeing some improvement?
Yes, I do think that. I mean, when I'm in the classrooms, I have to be honest with you, the year, I came here in 2020 and we were still virtual. And so I was here when students first were in the classroom after that. And even as something as simple, I was in first and second grade classrooms, the challenge that students were having with their gross motor skills, holding a pencil, was challenging because, those are the types of things you just kind of take I've taught early elementary, so I don't take pencil grip for granted. It's something that has to be taught. But when we had students at home for that period of time, they were not writing with pencils on a regular basis like they do just naturally in a classroom. So handwriting, things like that you wouldn't think of had impact, really did. Learning school, how to come just to school has been something that our early elementary schools have had to overcome. And so I think I answered your question.
Yeah, it's all kind of tied together. I'm just wondering, as just a board person or general knowledge, when are we as educators or you as educators, we're going to get away from it's a reason why, and when can we get away from that and go, okay, these are real scores?
Well, I think all the scores are real since the pandemic. It's more
COVID or pre-COVID, and I kind of cringe a little bit because some of these kids have been in 3K, and we're still seeing some. I understand the long-term effects, and I expect to see that as they go forward. But a certain class, a second grader, those kids, did they have this? You know what I mean?
Yes,
right?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, I receive what you're saying. Thank you.
Megan Miller?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to react a little bit to the presentation. I really appreciate you putting it together, and I think like we've heard a couple times tonight, people kind of reflect on like data and context, and it can be a tricky thing in education because like a lot of the tests that we have to use to assess student growth or progress are not educator selected. They're like mandated by politicians. And so like, for example, I know we talked a little bit about ACT, and I mean like there's like a whole peer-reviewed research kind of article on ERIC that just talks about how like on an independent analysis of the alignment of the ACT to Common Core state standards, most of them are a very weak match. So I think actually Mr. Hankins has done a really great job, like when you presented data saying like, well, are we matching curriculum to what we're being assessed on like in forward? And like, absolutely we are, because that's like state standards driven, but then it's like, here comes the ACT and that's not designed that way. And so I appreciate the context that you're giving us about like, you know, we're using multiple metrics, like this piece tells us this about kids, we're making these, you know, reviews and revisions, just like we heard from Ms. Papke, right? So like, we're gonna look at that third grade stuff and say, all right, cool, what do we do next? Like you said, there'll be like a discussion kind of thing. So, I mean, could you speak a little bit, since this is something that I think people maybe just like need a little more context, like who are outside of like the industry, like, for example, something that comes to mind even like with Act 20 is like when you do an assessment of student learning, the closer you get it to their curriculum, like what they're learning, like the better picture you're going to get of what they actually can do versus like here's like you said, like a moment in time out of context, right? I don't know. If you can speak to that a little bit, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. I probably could give an entire hour presentation on assessments alone, probably longer than that. It's actually a passion of mine. I know that that is not exciting to a lot of people in the room, but it is to me. So there is actually someone by the name of, I believe it's Dylan William. It's either William Dylan or Dylan William. It's one of those names where it can be reversed. And he talks a lot about the importance of formative assessments and classroom-based assessments. And that's because you're thinking about what are we actually learning in class, and is this assessment really about the learning that's happening, or is it an assessment that's outside of the learning environment? Bless you. And so if I'm learning about research of insects in my classroom with my students, it would behoove me as a classroom teacher to give a formative assessment on formative, meaning where are we at in our learning about what insects are, right? There's that type of assessment. And then there's a comprehension assessment like MAPS, or even further away, a standardized test where we're asking, right, read a story about snow and answer comprehension questions. It isn't about insects, which what you've been learning about for 3 weeks. It's something entirely different. And that's important reading, and that type of comprehension is important to assess, but it's just understanding the context in which the assessments are being applied and how the outcomes, because really the purpose of assessment is to improve and inform instructional practice. So how immediately close to the assessment is the learning? A formative assessment should be reflective of the learning that's happening that day, that week, that month. A standardized assessment is much further away from the learning. And so how we take those results and reflect on them to think about improved practices is really the importance of assessment. And so I hope I get at what you're asking, and as educators, as many of you know on the board, I've been in this for a long time, and that assessment conversation shifts back and forth depending on kind of the politics of it all. But in the world of educational reform, there's always been a press on the importance of really classroom-based authentic assessments, formative assessments to inform instructional practice.
No, I really appreciate that. And then I
Sure.
also just wanted to speak to, it's Mr. Hankins, I thought the same thing, like when I first looked at the presentation, I'm like, oh, I want to see, like what are the trends? And I'm thinking about COVID and grade levels. I have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And so my 10-year-old's that fourth grade class. So that's, she was in 4K, like in 2019, right? So like when all that, all went down. And, I think I guess from like a parent and a teacher perspective, I'm gonna like share something and then follow it up with a question, I guess. Like I've totally like the lack of exposure to like language-rich environment is something that is really apparent to me like in my day job as a teacher, like when you look at like those different grade levels, and I see it in my own kids. Like my 10-year-old has done like an amazing job, like kind of like catching up, right, from COVID because of like the intervention and things like we're providing already in the district. And like watching kind of her progress and comparing it to like, my 7-year-old who was lucky enough to have some to some degree early child, but there's definitely like differences when I compare it to like my 13-year-old, and all kids are different and all that, but it's like you see kind of those themes and trends. Could you speak a little bit to like, and this touches on what Ms. Papke talked about earlier too, like the responsiveness and I guess like just like the change that we've made that's built into like the how we're offering instruction and like how we are responding to those things and how that is like data informed. Like we're using like we can test for transferability of skills, or we can look at mastery of skills, and we can hone in on like those different pieces and how we teach. If you could like
So one of the things that informed our choice in selecting American Reading Company was when you look at materials, one of the things you really want to look at is the design of the materials and the way in which they've been designed. And so something that American Reading Company does is it took this old concept of guided reading but tipped it on its head, because the old concept of guided reading was couched in on a balanced literacy framework where you were over-reliant on the 3 cueing system. And so the American Reading Company took that concept of small group instruction, which used to be called guided reading, and calls it equitable conference schedules. And so when the students are moving through their level of books, they're assessed with the ERLA ongoing, it identifies what their goals should be and what area of foundational skills they should work on. And that's what's called power goals in American Reading Company. And the teachers are to create an equitable conferencing schedule, meaning that they meet more regularly with the striving readers than they do our students that are on and at a level. Doesn't mean that those students aren't met with and they aren't challenged, but the idea is that the ones that are striving are met with more because they need more support. And so as they rotate through those groups, they're focused on those power goals, and then those power goals are changing as they're moving through the levels of the decodables. And so that's an example of the way in which we're working to meet their needs. That's just embedded. It wasn't in the old reading curriculum that this district had. And so coupled with that, with Act 20 and the requirement of the universal screener and students needing to have reading plans, we can begin to see an overlap there. Something that I think we need to work on is the rate of reading. So the way that they're scoring fluency in the universal screener is the rate of reading. And I know you're no stranger to this, Ms. Miller. And so a child might read all of the words on the page, but if they're not reading the number of expected words within a minute, it's usually like rule of thumb 40 words per minute, let's just say, then they're not meeting what's considered a passing score on the universal screener. And so that's something that going forward we need to practice. Our students oftentimes are able to decode, but it's not fast enough rate of reading. And so that's something that I'm seeing that we can bring into the fold as a supplemental to our American Reading Company to meet those needs as well. And ultimately, we want automaticity, right? It's stressing rate of reading is not necessarily as important as decoding, but you do want automaticity because it does lead to improved comprehension.
Thank you so much. And just like
Sure.
last question, if you could provide, I don't know if the extent to which you would know this, but since you mentioned it in your presentation, just like about how the norms like haven't been updated, right, since COVID, and because third grade is, it's a turning point year in many ways for many reasons. Do you have a pulse on like to what extent are we like matching or diverting from trends sort of across the board, like in third grade? And like, do you anticipate like, is this like a Beloit thing that like might change as they update norms, or is this more of like a generalized issue?
Well, what the rep said today is the reason why.
Ms. Moratek, I'm sorry, before you continue, I have been informed we are at our 2-hour point, so I will entertain a motion to extend the meeting another half hour.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brian Nichols, seconded by Megan Miller. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Go ahead, Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Moratek, sorry.
No worries. So to efficiently answer for you, when I got off the phone today with the rep, what she said is that they are doing a national norm study because it is nationally in a lot, right? And she said, think about it with NAEP, what happened across the country with NAEP scores. It's the same with their national assessment. Everyone's scores are lower than they once were, so they're recalibrating those scores.
Right, so we definitely obviously want to be responsive to what it's telling us. I just want to make sure we have the proper context and like how to receive what you've reported.
Yep, but it also means with that yes, and also we need to move more of our students out of that first quintile, and we know that.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Brian Nichols?
Thank you, Board President Johnson. Okay, so going forward from Mrs. Mrs. Papke's presentation, can we compare sixth grade, seventh grade to third, fourth, and fifth on reading? The reading scores?
Yeah, what do you mean by compare? Help me.
So seventh grade, we're at 29.1 average and above?
Yes.
Okay. That's lower than grades 3 through 6.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Explain.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a definitive answer. Yeah, I would like to see as the grades go up, the kids' proficiencies go up. And that's part of why I included 8th grade pre-ACT, because there is a dip in that 7th grade group. However, for whatever reason on the pre-ACT, they are starting to bounce back there. And so I'm hoping, and they're different tests, so they tell different things. But I am hopeful that the pre-ACT will indicate ACT scores, because what we're scored on a more pragmatic level for the report card is the forward, the pre-ACT, and the ACT. Those are the standardized tests. And so MAPS is that internal benchmark, kind of that litmus test of where we're going. But I'm also closely monitoring those standardized tests as well. Yeah, and I don't have an exact answer of why the 7th graders dipped more so than the others. I'm sorry, I just don't.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Moratek, while you're on this slide, I actually did have a question about this one. Are we looking at the same cohort for those two groups?
No.
Okay, so I'm wondering, because in your parentheses, you said this demonstrates growth. Are you talking about growth of the student academic achievement or growth in terms of improvement of instruction?
Growth as far as academic outcomes. I'm going to assume that there's been a change in instructional practice which has led to those. So we would expect to see lower scores in fall than we do in spring. And because it's right, the kids are taking the test twice, but they haven't yet taken the spring one this year, so I couldn't do a spring to spring comparison. So this is last year's 8th graders as they left in spring, this year's 8th graders as they came in fall. Because what we want to see is growth over time. Kind of to Mr. Nichols' point, if the 7th graders score 35% this year, next year we want to see them scoring 40%, right? Like we want to grow. And so I wanted to show this to say, it's remarkable to me just to look at the math growth here, because our incoming 8th graders scored more proficiency, a higher proficiency than our 8th graders last year in spring. And so that's showing growth, that they grew actually last year as 7th graders. And we had our new math adoption. So I don't know if that's I don't know if it's the change in instructional practice with the materials. It's hard to draw direct correlations, but something's happening in math to see, I would think, to see that change.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Moratek? Thank you.
Welcome.
Next on the agenda, we have the 2025 referendum discussion. The purpose of this is to discuss, consider, and take action on suggestions and feedback board members have to share After listening to the response of different community members and organizations, the board should discuss the future of the Cunningham building. The reason I put this on the agenda again this week, or this meeting, is because after two referendum sessions, as I was exiting, some of the concerns were shared about the lack of a West Side middle school. I'm not looking for a long, drawn-out conversation here tonight, but if other board members are interested in having this discussion, I have discussed with Mr. Bricko and Dr. Garrison this item, and I would even entertain a motion, something to the effect of to move approval to have the Facilities Department present a report to the board, which will include physical considerations, cost, timelines, and enrollment projections necessary to use Cunningham as a middle school. I did talk to Mr. Bricko again earlier today to confirm that he would be willing to work on such a report, and if there's anything that I have left off that he would include. But if any board members have anything that they'd like to add into the report, please let me know. Mr. Hankins?
I'm fully in favor of researching it. I think it'd be a very positive movement in the right direction for the climate of our district and the West Siders. The reconfiguration back to that, you know, I'm sure in this study it's going to take a long time to figure out, you know, the present occupants of Cunningham and what we do, but there are plenty of spaces available, and it's just going to be, I think, a very worthwhile discussion, and I applaud Mr. Bricko for taking this on. So I would like to, if you're looking for a motion, to research it or take it in the next step, I would like to make that motion. How that looks or sounds, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But maybe you want to hear from all the board members, so.
Sure. Ms. Miller, your hand is up.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think I've heard that too. People bring things up. I think it's important to highlight the context. It's been a minute since it was discussed, and I think sometimes some things that get lost in the discussion are like, you know, what was the context? What were the causes and outcomes? I'm a little wary of having the conversation here. I'm not sure if Dr. Garrison or Mr. Brick or anybody were able to like join us tonight for us to even, because like I guess I'm a little reticent to make a motion to do something without getting their info because I want to make sure we do the right thing. I of course am totally in favor of revisiting, shedding light, recalibrating, and like where were we, why, and like, you know, what have been the changes, outcomes, or whatever since. One question I have, in addition to like why, you know, maybe asking for, if it's appropriate to ask for us to revisit like why the decision was made to begin with, you know, what were the factors and why was that the best course of action as recommended. My big concern is the entire state of Wisconsin is projected to have declining enrollment. So like outside of the issues that are unique to our community, because we do have our own Beloit School District reasons, there's also a state projected decline, and that's been projected by WASBO. So if we're gonna have that conversation, I think we also need to kick around the possibility, because this was what was thrown out when that decision was first made, the possibility of having to consolidate down to just one middle school, not because it's something that we would like love to do, because I don't think any of us up here would like to do that, but I don't want to speak, I'll speak for myself, but out of just like necessity, like right sizing, being responsive to enrollment. So I'm not against having some kind of a presentation by any means. I think these are really important things, right, to share and like, you know, provide an update. I guess I just want to also make sure that we don't mislead people to believe that, hey, we're like, I don't want to dangle something in front of somebody. And I guess I feel like as just the board up here without administrative like input, I just don't know that I have all the information I need.
Yep, thank you. And as of 6:45 this evening, when I was with Mr. Bricko, he knew that this was on and agreed absolutely fully. He is ready to present this. He was hoping he would be here tonight to even answer some questions, but he's still at that other meeting. But he was fully in support of doing a report and me asking the board what to include, as I mentioned, enrollment projections, so we're not getting ahead of ourselves. But there is still some frustrated community members that this happened, and perhaps if we could include, an explanation of why it happened. And we may end up saying, hey, we really don't need 2 middle schools, one middle school, but let's, get some information and find out what we should be doing.
If I can just quickly respond, and then I'll jump off. That sounds good. I appreciate that you shared that about your conversation with Mr. Bricko. I think just a little input for like what I'd like to see in a report then, just the 2 things you mentioned. Also, I think it would be interesting to see like if and how all of the facility possibilities fit into like our 10-year facilities plan would be a detail I would like to see, just so that we can share kind of what those plans look like and like, timelines and like what from their perspective makes sense. And thank you so much.
Vice President Nichols.
Thank you. Yes, I too have heard the comments. They've never stopped, quite frankly. I mean, anywhere I go, every once in a while somebody brings that up from this side of the river, and that happened. That happened to be my first. The night I was sworn in, this place was packed. And out there was packed, and people were out in the hall, and they were here about that. So, yes, I think it's worth looking into, and I would be glad to second Mr. Board Member Hankins' motion to do the due diligence to make this, see if it would work.
Thank you. Greg Schneider.
I think it's a good thing to go back and to review the economics of the decision to, as we downsized our middle schools with the reconfiguration. I know a lot of the numbers, as we look at what costs would be for different buildings to be used in different ways, has been presented. But again, maybe it's time that we need to make sure we present these again to the community so they begin to see what the actual costs would be in order to make any difference or changes in middle school configurations. And I think as we move forward, that it's also, we make it clear that this is not a promise that we're going to do anything different. We are just going to go back and relook at the numbers and the feasibility of a building being used in a different way.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Miller.
Sorry, Mr. Schneider just reminded me of something too. I think like that also has to come with the context of, since you mentioned reconfiguration, I'd love to hear too, like an update on, I guess like the gains or changes or whatever the situation is of going back to that K-12 6-8 model. That's something that I've also, like prior to us making that decision, was a regular topic of discussion. Mr. Nichols, I would say on par probably with the experience that you've had, right, with what you had just described. So I think because those 2 things were sort of like interconnected, I think it would be nice to sort of to bring that context in as well, because that might inform our future decision making depending on what Mr. Bricko has to share.
Thank you. Mr. Hankins, did you want to make a motion then?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the school district administration move forward with a feasibility study for the reuse of Cunningham as a middle school.
Okay, and if I may, for clarity, we're not looking for a study, but a report. A study may take months.
Okay, whatever time Mr. Bricko can put together.
Okay.
As a first step, not to throw money at it, but.
Okay, so
Yeah.
then may I
Okay,
ask you to reword that to
yes.
be report rather than study?
Yes, a report rather than a study. Shall. With no time stamp on it, just that we're going to move forward with it. I think. Is that okay?
Ms. Shope, when you're ready, would you mind reading back the motion before I ask for a second?
So what I have is the school district administration move forward with a feasibility report for Cunningham School to be considered as a middle school.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Hankins, seconded by Brian Nichols. Any discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Miller.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to reflect kind of the discussion we just had, I'm just wondering if we might want to amend that just to say like some sort of like report and update on the facilities. I mean, I like how you use the word feasibility, but again, I think if we're being that pointed about can we or can't we make this a middle school, I think that's a little cart before the horse. Like I think like what I'm hearing us say is, I think that's a popular thing for a group of people, and I don't discount the validity of that. I don't know that we want to say, hey, like, can we, can't we, just that one thing. I mean, I think how are we being most purposeful, and I mean, certainly geographically equitable with the facility space we have, like what makes sense with our projections. I think it's an important thing to be mindful of. I don't know, you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying. We do have the facilities study that was done last year, so I'm not interested in spending more money on a new facility study. I trust Mr. Bricko's ability to bring a comprehensive report to us, listening to what we've said, what we've asked for. I think he will do a good job.
I'm sure he will. I guess I just like, I guess what I'm hearing in the motion is really focused on, can this be a middle school? And I know that that is certainly something that is going to be considered. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I think I'm not talking about redoing a facility study. I guess like, you know, looking at things like projected enrollment, like building usage, like data that he has that probably when you had that talk with him a couple hours ago, probably what he's planning on talking about. I guess just to Greg's point, I just don't want to say, hey, we're considering making this a middle school and then we're going to have this report and we're like, wah, no, we can't really, you know, I mean, that's not fair, I think, to the community. So I guess just in the spirit of transparency, I just want to be careful with how we word it, phrase it. I'm totally all about considering and hearing all those things. I want to be cautious about communication, setting expectations, all that.
Yep, no, and I understand. I'm right there with you. And that's why I asked to have the things like the enrollment projections and whatnot for clarity and openness. This is something that Mr. Bricko brought to my attention last summer, and we have been talking about this off and on for the past several months. It's something that I think he is ready to move forward with a report that will be comprehensive. And again, I trust that he will have this well thought out and bring something to us.
But back to what Mrs. Miller said, and I understand that, I don't, even with the wording of the motion, doesn't really preclude us, pigeonhole us into just using it as a middle school. I think that'll be bore out with the report. And if it's not feasible, then, you know, I don't think we're nailed to that. You know, it'll come out in the report. And I think this board is open to, looking at different options, and which will come out of the report.
Well, since you're asking me, yes, same page. I just like I think you and I are saying the same thing. I just want to be really careful with how we're wording that motion, because people aren't necessarily going to like listen to this whole conversation we're having. They're going to see a posted agenda item. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm reacting to. But yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Levy has her hand raised.
No problem. I was just going to briefly add that we may want to consider changing the language to looking into alternative uses for Cunningham, and that way it stays broad. It doesn't appear to be leading that this is what the direction we want or expect to go. So I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration.
Mr. Hankins, there is a motion and a second. I would prefer us to either vote this up or down and then either redo the motion if needed. So I will ask Ms. Shope to reread the motion again.
school district administration will move forward with a feasibility report for Cunningham School to be considered as a middle school. Motion by Tom Hankinson, seconded by Brian Nichols.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Motion does not pass as it is tied. I will entertain a motion reworded.
Ms. Levy, I was going to make a motion, but I think you had it worded better than I was going to.
I move approval for the administration to compile a feasibility study for alternative uses for Cunningham Middle School.
And I'll second with the clarification with all of the information we currently have, right? Like I think Mr. Hankins said really well, like we're not going to throw
Yes, ma'am.
money and time at the things. Yep, second then.
Motion by Amy Levy, seconded by Megan Miller. Ms. Shope, did you get the motion?
So what I have is move approval of the administration to compile a feasibility study using resources we already have for alternative uses for Cunningham School. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Anybody else opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-1. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Typically, there is no separate discussion of the items unless a board member so requests, in which event the item or items will be removed from the general order of the business and considered in their normal sequence on the agenda. Would anybody like any of these items removed? Ms. Levy?
Sorry about that. Thank you. I'd like to remove item D, policy 345.4, promotion and retention. And I don't need to remove it, but just a note, just for consistency, the March 4 regular meeting minutes doesn't have the time that we adjourn, and most of our other minutes, we do have that. So if we could just include that. Thank you.
Okay. I will entertain a motion of approval of the consent agenda minus item D.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Amy Levy, seconded by Tom Hankins. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Levy, item D, policy 345.4, promotion and retention.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we just need to remove section 4, the appeal process.
Can we clarify that section 4, the appeal process, is supposed to be removed?
Oh, my apologies. I thought everyone read both documents. So in policy 345.4, promotion and retention, section 4 has an appeal process if the parent does not agree with the recommendation. But if you also look at 3rd and 4th grade promotion procedures, there's no need for an appeal process, because if the parent doesn't agree for the retention, then it doesn't happen, and it doesn't matter what the other factors are. So as we discussed at the policy committee, if we could just remove section 4, I think we're good.
May I add something?
Please.
So after policy committee, I did a little bit of thinking, and the guidance is for 3rd and 4th grade, 3rd to 4th grade only. So we did kind of have a discussion. There could potentially need to be an appeal process for any other grade level. Just something to consider. So
If I may. So just one concern. If we are having conversations after the committee makes a decision, it's helpful to close that loop so we understand why information is being left in that the committee asked to have it removed. And just for clarification, what grades are covered?
I'm not unsure what you're asking. What do you mean, what grades are covered?
So in the policy, it talks about how promotion and retention works. And in the document that was attached to that policy for the committee to discuss, it specifically talks about 3rd and 4th grade, the guidance. So if I am a parent of a 5th grader and the school is recommending retention and I don't agree with that, so if my child was getting ready to go into 4th grade, it's my decision. But are you saying if my child is getting ready to go into another grade, it's no longer my decision as a parent?
I got to make sure I'm following here. So it's the opposite. Yep. It's the opposite. If you're going from 3rd to 4th grade and we want to retain you and the parent says, no, thank you, it's the parent's right to move on.
Correction. So my question under the same policy, if my child is going into 5th grade and the district wants to retain my child and I say, no, thank you, are you saying it's no longer my choice as a parent? It's only my choice if the promotion or retention consideration is with respect to 4th grade?
In regards to state statute, yes. I think in the district, we would always entertain a conversation with the parent. And I just want to point out the appeal process is only in regards to not necessarily the decision, but did you follow the process? Just like an expulsion appeal. It's not, you're not appealing the decision, you're just appealing whether or not the process was followed.
So according to the document that's attached, you're appealing the decision. And if the parent doesn't sign off, then the student moves forward. It doesn't matter what the other factors are.
I believe in the guiding document, there is no appeal.
There's no need for an appeal because it's the parent's decision.
Correct, but I believe you just said in the guiding document, the appeal is.
No,
Did I
no.
misunderstand you?
No. So here's my other concern. My first question in the policy committee was, I was concerned that the appeal process wasn't thoroughly laid out. And so I was going to bring that up for us to discuss. But then when I read the supporting document, there's no need for an appeal process because it's the parent's decision. But if you're saying that only applies to students who are going to potentially be retained from moving forward to 4th grade and no other grade of student, then I think this needs to be pulled entirely and taken back to the policy committee so that we can have an outline of what the appeal process is. Because right now it just says you submit the appeal. It doesn't say who's going to get back to you. It doesn't say when they're going to get back to you. It doesn't say what next steps are if you don't agree with that process. And all of our other appeal processes have that laid out. Is there something I'm missing?
Sure. I mean, if you feel like that's what needs to be done, then sure, we would.
No,
support
I'm just asking if there's something that I'm missing because there is no start and end to the appeal process. It just says you submit an appeal. And in other appeal processes in the district, it's laid out what happens when and who is responsible for those steps.
I understand.
Ms. Levy, Mrs. Levy, I'm sorry, is that are you suggesting a motion? Do you want to move that back to policy?
Yeah, with this new revelation, I actually move that we move policy 345.4 and also 345.4 Rule 1 back to the policy committee so that we can further develop and have a clear understanding of what that, one, what the appeal process applies to, and two, what that appeal process is.
Point of clarification. Ms. Parliamentarian, don't we need to, so the Rule 1 was already approved as part of the consent agenda, so do we need to undo that motion?
We would need to rescind that motion and send the policy and the rule back to the policy committee now that we have new information that wasn't shared with the committee.
Okay, so
I will entertain a motion to rescind the policy 345.4 Rule 1 promotion criteria.
I move we rescind the decision, actually to retire policy 345.4 Rule 1.
Second.
Okay, so Mrs. Levy has a motion to retire policy 345.4 Rule 1 promotion criteria, seconded by,
I'm so sorry, to rescind, the motion was to retire it, because that's how it's presented.
Did I
So,
not-
no, we just need to rescind that motion, not retire it, but rescind that motion.
oh, you didn't say, I'm sorry, I thought you said retire.
No, it's slated for retirement, and that's what we approved. So we need to
Okay.
rescind the motion to
We are
retire.
rescinding the retirement, thank you. Okay, any other discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mrs. Levy, would you like to make the next motion?
Sure, no problem. I move that we return policies 345.4 and 345.4 Rule 1 to the policy committee for further discussion.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Levy, seconded by Mr. Schneider. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting 30 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to extend by Brian Nichols, seconded by Megan Miller. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the Human Resources Employee Recommendations. Are there any open session questions for the HR Committee Report Employment Recommendations Exhibit A? Are there any closed session questions on Exhibit A? I will entertain a motion of approval of HR Committee Report Employment Recommendations Exhibit A.
So moved.
Motion by Brian Nichols. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amy Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item is executive session. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering specific personnel recommendations. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Megan Miller, seconded by Brian Nichols. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Schopp, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Brian Nichols,
Aye.
Tom Hankins,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
and Tia Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
The Board of Education may reconvene to public session in order to take action, if any, if necessary, on items discussed in closed session. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.